Majority Report with Sam Seder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
It is Friday, October 5th, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live, not steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal, but instead from sunny Las Vegas, Nevada, where I haven't seen the sun in days because I've been inside the Bellagio Hotel Conference Center at the Mass Torts 2018 conference. Yes, folks, the biannual visit to Las Vegas to sit down with some tort lawyers, hear about some of the most recent cases that are taking place around the country, involving very often enormous amounts of corporate malfeasance. And today is no different. I am here for this conference. Done a couple of pre-records yesterday because we had trouble scheduling for today. Later on the program, an attorney named Mike Berg, who has been on this program before, to talk about the explosions that took place in Massachusetts from the underground gas pipelines and litigation. I think that's going to, or actions are going to be brought against the company. I think it's National Grid. I can't recall. And then I sat down with Bobby Kennedy yesterday to talk about a case that he was working on as an attorney out of his firm in California against Monsanto, and a large settlement that was given as a function of, in regards to Roundup. And I should just tell you right now, we did not talk about vaccinations. I've addressed this in the past with Bobby Kennedy on air, and I've spoken about it on air. I've spoken to him about it on air in the past. We have a fundamental disagreement about his, I wouldn't call him an anti-vaxxer, but I would call him very vax skeptical. And I think that's really an incredibly dangerous position to have, and contrary to the science. But you can go back and find that. I can't remember exactly when we had that conversation, but we did not get into that at all because I was more interested in that Monsanto thing, and that's what I'm here for, to hear about these cases. Interesting. I figured I'd use an off-label usage for Roundup. So that's a little hint. Just a little bit of house cleaning, and before we get to our first guest, who is also here doing his show from this conference, David Packman will be joining me in a moment. But before he does, a couple of moments of house cleaning. It's been now publicly announced when I go to Politicon, I will be debating Charlie Kirk. He is the titular head of Turning Points USA. So, I mean, some people on Twitter have noticed, like, some flunkies from Turning Points have been randomly saying, like, Sam Seder, I just listened to him for 7 minutes and I could never get those minutes back. Well, yeah, it's true. They will never get them back. And I will continue to take from every single person involved with Turning Points USA. I will take. And so that will be Sunday the 20th or 21st or something like that in L.A. I assume they're going to put it online at one point. I'm not sure. And but I'll have more to say about that later. And before we get into this, and I think, David Pakman knows as well as anybody that about the need for a service like News Voice. News Voice is one of today's sponsors, and you can go to newsvoice.com/majority. I think everybody understands the problems with media concentration and the idea of epistemological bubbles that we find ourselves in. I think I used that properly. And it is highly relevant to know what the other side is saying, what conservative thought is, and you don't even have to look at it as the other side. It's just simply getting different perspectives than your own. That's the thing that's good about News Voice. It's a new media company that's come up with their own response to that problem of our blinders and our sort of like predestined algorithms that send us news. It's called News Voice. It's an app for iOS and Android. It gives you access for free if you go to newsvoice.com/majority, and it gives you a personalized news feed that you set up by aggregating a mix of mainstream media news sources, international news sources, independent media sources, and then multiple sources are provided for each news story, as well as left and right you can choose. The entire app is fueled by crowdsourcing. You can upvote stories you think are important so more people will see them. You can add stories to the app, or you can add a source that's missing for a story. It's meant to be completely open and democratized news aggregator that lets you get every side of every story. They also have a video interview series featuring guests from Chris Hedges to Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. You can go download the app for free at newsvoice.com/majority. I put the link under this video if you're watching on video, and if you're not, you're listening, we've put the link in the description of the podcast. So you can check it out. It's newsvoice.com/majority. Joining me now in the, I don't know what they call this room, the expo room or whatever it is, David Pakman of The David Pakman Show, here to help me, before we get into a couple of those interviews with lawyers, talk about the state of play, obviously the big story of the week, maybe of the month, maybe of the year, aside, of course, from the election that's happening in a month. Brett Kavanaugh's nomination coming down to the wire tomorrow.
51 votes to move forward. Have 30 hours of debate, maybe as early as Saturday. They'll have the final vote. Senator Collins from Maine, scheduled to make a statement at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Yeah, so that's 3 hours from now.
Yeah, I guess that's 3 hours from now.
And initially reported that she's just going to announce why she's just utterly satisfied with this investigation that's taken place. And even though she had her hesitations initially, she is ready to say, hey, you know what, we did the investigation, and now there's no further reason to hold up Brett Kavanaugh. But a few reporters, including Manu Raju from CNN, said it's not clear that that's what she's going to announce at 3 Eastern. And that would conceivably make a difference. And the 51 votes to move forward on the last 30 hours of debate, Joe Manchin from West Virginia was the one Democrat to say, yes, let's do it. And Lisa Murkowski from Alaska was the one Republican to say, no, let's not go forward. So this actually, there's sort of like two narratives, right? One is take the 30,000-foot view only, which is it doesn't matter what Susan Collins says on Tuesday. It doesn't matter whether Lisa Murkowski says let's move on to the final debate or not, that they're going to push him through. That was always the plan, and that McConnell knew it, and that even Jeff Flake arguably was part of that plan, going to him and saying, listen, you're not running for re-election. What if you say let's do this investigation? You'll get attention, but we'll still push them through eventually. That's like the 30,000-foot narrative. The micro narrative is, well, no, if Collins says she's not going to and Manchin says no, then Brett Kavanaugh doesn't get on the court.
Well, a lot of this is going to be resolved in 3 hours.
Yeah.
But, and so for many people, by the time they hear this, it'll be moot. But the dynamic one way or another is this, it seems to me. Joe Manchin will not vote for... Joe Manchin will not be the 50th vote, let's put it this way.
Right.
Because obviously the 51st vote would come from Mike Pence. If Susan Collins announces that she's not going to vote for Kavanaugh, it's very hard for me to believe that Joe Manchin is going to be the 50th vote. And then Mike Pence.
Right.
It's just... I think at that point he can be guaranteed that if he ever needs a single favor from the Democratic caucus, he will not get it. I don't know. It's conceivable that Joe Manchin could decide at one point to become a Republican. I mean, I don't know. Like, if he votes, if he's the 50th vote, it seems to me there's going to be some speculation about that. Because
no, but there's already been for years, right? I mean, and this will be, it seems to be that we're at that point.
This is the move he's going to make.
Yeah.
I don't know why he would do that other than maybe he wants to be in the majority.
Yeah.
And they may offer him something. But I suspect that if Susan Collins comes out and votes no, or she announces that at 3, then Manchin is going to be a no. And the theory would be this. All the senators who vote in this middle ground, right, they're all looking for cover. And so Murkowski, she votes no on cloture. The pressure's off her. No one's looking at her vote. She needed to not just vote against Kavanaugh. She needed to fervently vote against Kavanaugh because I think the primary impetus is the Native community in Alaska. She has had strong support from in the past, and because of Kavanaugh's rulings about Indian reservations, they are very nervous about him. And then this, I think, on top of that, there's a large amount of sexual assault in the Native community, and I think this has become a very important issue for them. So Murkowski, all the pressure's off her. Nobody's talking about Murkowski anymore. She has sidelined herself. Collins may want to do the same thing because it will come down to Manchin. And certainly Manchin, Collins, and Murkowski have already talked about what they're going to do. Those three know what each other's plans were.
Isn't it insane, though? And I know that, this is not like a shock to people who pay attention to politics. It doesn't even figure into any of this what Brett Kavanaugh actually did to women. It's just not a factor, and it never was, right? Like, even from the beginning where Republicans were saying, well, do we or don't we need an investigation? Or who exactly is the right person to ask questions of Christine Blasey Ford? Like, it never actually mattered what Kavanaugh did or didn't do.
I don't think that's true.
Really?
I think Murkowski may have had some issues with voting for Kavanaugh prior to this, but I think Collins would have. I don't know. Collins still may vote for her, but for him.
But you're saying that her vote would be based on what she genuinely believes happened 30 years ago, or just the political viability of it?
No. I don't think any of them give a crap about what specifically happened one way or another. It is
right.
What do they think is going to, with the public revelations, how is that going to interact with their constituents?
Exactly.
And will it hurt them? And so the Kavanaugh stuff does make a difference one way or another. If it had been, if Blasey Ford had come forward and been far less compelling, I think then Kavanaugh would be fine right now. He still may be ultimately fat, but it had I don't know what Kavanaugh could have done worse, but maybe if there had been another allegation that came out this week that was more prominent, or maybe if Mark Judge had said, yeah, it's true.
Right.
I think that would have changed things, without a doubt. So, I think these things matter, not because of the way that they influence the politician in their mind and their sentiment, although I think Heidi Heitkamp, and we should note this, it is clear this Kavanaugh thing has hurt her.
Yeah.
And I think for her, largely it was a personal measure. She may feel that she's going to lose this election anyways, and which makes the decision more about like how she wants to go out. Although I think there's also an argument, it's going to be interesting to see, with the Kavanaugh hearing behind her, right? If the Republicans vote against Kavanaugh, if it's ultimately Collins and Murkowski who bring Kavanaugh down. The pressure's off of Heitkamp. If Kavanaugh gets in, the pressure's off of Heitkamp. So I think she's going to have another month to reset the campaign and go back to the issue of health care, which was working for her in South Dakota. So, we'll see.
Do you think Trump has stuck with Kavanaugh because he just wants to win and he sees having to pick somebody else, who he obviously would, as losing? Or do you think it's, I don't know if you've been following the really specific legal reasons why he wants Kavanaugh on the court for what's coming up when it comes to presidential power, when it comes to, there's a case about the sovereignty of the presidency, or like a mix of the two?
I'm sure it's a mix of the two. I think also, it's unlikely, but there's a scenario where they do not confirm Kavanaugh. The midterms happen, Democrats win, and Jeff Flake and Susan Collins say it's not appropriate to confirm somebody in the lame duck session. I think
that's the period between the election and January.
Yes, yeah. If the Senate's going to change hands, I think that's a far-fetched scenario, but it's possible. It's possible. I mean, maybe, McConnell thinks there's a 10% chance of that happening. It's dangerous, and why I don't want to go there.
But even then, doesn't Trump get his pick after January? Like, will Democrats actually say, I know online people say, if that happens, Democrats should say, we're going to do what you guys did to Garland, but they're not going to do it.
I'm not sure that they wouldn't do that, but they certainly could say that and get a pick that is not on that list of the Heritage Foundation.
That may be.
I mean, the idea that they wouldn't use their leverage at all seems, even for Democrats,
unlikely.
Unlikely. I mean... they still got to win an election, 2 years from January.
Yeah.
Or, at that point, 20 months away. So that would be stunning for them to say, oh, well, yeah, now we will be the ones to confirm Kavanaugh. I don't think
that's not happening.
So I think there's just too many different. Who knows why Donald Trump wants this? I think on some level it's also. He doesn't want Kavanaugh to go down for this reason.
Right.
And because this is his core brand proposition.
Do you think that...
Wait, why are you asking me all the questions?
Oh, I don't know. I'm curious what you think.
Well, do you think?
Yeah.
Whatever the question you were going to ask me, ask yourself.
I forgot the question because you threw me off.
Oh, all right.
No, when I think about this entire thing, and I think back to the initial, McConnell is he's either stumbled into just like a brilliant combination of a chain of events that's going to lead to Kavanaugh getting in, or it was beautifully orchestrated from the beginning, where McConnell said from the start, listen, if we slow this down and do an investigation, Democrats will just say it wasn't a sufficient investigation. Of course, then they did a completely insufficient investigation, and now McConnell's able to say, I told you that this is what Democrats were going to say. Was it so scripted from the beginning, or did it just end up that way?
No, I think they didn't want to have an investigation.
They genuinely didn't want one.
Right, but it's the obvious thing to say at that point. Democrats will say this because he also knows,
if we do one,
we're not going to do a complete one. The president can do exactly what he says. We pretend we're doing the idea of doing an investigation to whitewash anything, and not a real investigation, is probably one of the oldest things that politicians, one of their oldest techniques in the world, right? Andrew Cuomo with the Moreland Commission, and then that's what he thought he was getting. And when the Moreland Commission started to actually look into corruption, he's like, well, we're going to have to end this because you guys are not... and this is part of the reason why they wanted to keep it quiet, so that the investigation, they're not going to show the results, so that they can leak things. They've done it with different parts of the Russia investigation. This is the way the game is played. But for Collins and Murkowski, in particular, they have to be concerned insofar as they can look at the real reports and know how incomplete it is, and then be worried that next week the Washington Post is going to come out with a story that says X, Y, and Z, and their ability to have said, like, oh, we saw the FBI investigation, clearly, goes out the window because they could see that it was incomplete, right? I mean, so the pressure here, there's a certain amount of pressure from just the reality of the situation and what they anticipate are future risks. So
I mean, this is why McConnell just never has to think twice about anything he's doing, because there's just no political risk effectively for any of this stuff for him in Kentucky.
Well, not just in Kentucky. I mean,
or even in his position in the Senate.
Yeah, he has been incredibly successful in jamming the courts with right-wing judges, and I mean, he thinks that history is going to look on his move of keeping that seat open with Garland as the reason why Donald Trump won and led to a fundamental shift in American society because of the courts. And it's hard to argue with that. What also struck me as interesting this week was Brett Kavanaugh yesterday wrote an op-ed.
Yeah, in the Wall Street Journal.
In the Wall Street Journal, where he apologized for how brusque he was.
But said that the reason why that all happened was the allegations.
Yes. I think that was a bow to Jeff Flake, who had said a couple of days ago, we can't have that on the court, that type of... And so they said, go write an op-ed and address this. I mean, I think that's what's happening. We're watching sort of like a PR, crisis management type of situation. And that's what they're doing. And it's like geared towards, I mean, it's sort of sick.
Oh, it's very sick.
It's geared towards one or two people. I mean, that is one of the things that I think has really come out of this, too, is that in addition to the court hopefully being publicly scarred by this. I mean, I have been very jaded about the Supreme Court for almost exactly 18 and a half years. Or coming up on almost 19 years with the Bush v. Gore result and ruling. But I think two things come out of this if Kavanaugh is confirmed. One is the Supreme Court as an institution is been dramatically weakened in the eyes of the American public and ripe for some type of legitimate reform. I think we're going to hear calls for court packing, which in principle I have no problem with. I think
calls from the left.
Yeah. When Democrats return to power, and term limits, which I think are, probably a better reform and more durable long term. I have no problem.
Weren't there people, though, before the 2016 presidential election saying thinking about the future of the Supreme Court isn't a valid thing to think about when you decide who to vote for president? I remember people were saying that.
David Packman and I went to dinner last night with some constituencies who felt that. I don't know. Like, Michael has been IMing me, like, get to it already. No, I don't. I mean, look.
Oh, the stuff from last night.
Reveal
it from last night. Absolutely.
No.
All personal discussions on the record.
No.
Hey, David, by the way.
Hey, Michael.
I just think the left needs to start taking the court more seriously.
I think they need to stop being fucking corporate Democrats.
All right. But I think the left needs to start taking the court more seriously, and I think they're going to on some level.
What do you mean when you say the left?
I mean everyone from the center through the entire left.
Well, that's not going to happen.
Well, what do you mean by that's not going to happen?
Well, what does it mean to take the court seriously?
That people
like what's actionable about that? What should
you don't
do?
write off considering the impact of what's going to happen on the court when you decide who to vote for.
So here's
which I think
my
some people were
theory.
doing before 2016.
Here's
Okay.
my theory.
But
We
that's
vote our
and not
fucking
just-
conscience, and then there's a
All
filibuster.
right, well, wait. I want to just. I mean, I want to go through this with Jamie a little
but
bit. I think,
voting isn't activism. What else could the left be doing?
Oh, well, I think the left could also start being more aware of the issues that the court deals with, so that you don't just have activists who are arguing about a woman's right to choose, which of course is hugely important, and I don't want any what I'm saying to in any way imply that we need less of that. We need more of that.
The answer she's
But
looking for is car bombs, Sam.
But I'm saying there should also be a greater awareness about. I mean, when was the last time we heard anything about Citizens United?
Maybe also things like feeders, like
I mean,
the Federalist
honestly, like when was the
Society.
last time we heard anybody talk about Citizens United? That died a very quick death, or I should say, in terms of like activism around that, or beyond Citizens United. What about things like, the importance of the court in terms of what agencies do, and even things like the ACA. You can both feel like the ACA did not go far enough, and that there's something fundamentally wrong with the court because it doesn't say that the government can expand Medicaid.
Don't you
I
think
mean-
also a strategy for dealing with things like the Federalist Society and long-term plans for how to actually have
they tried to do that, right? Exactly. They tried to do
Right.
that with the ACS. I mean,
Right.
when Obama, first of all, there should have been more pressure on Obama to make nominations of subsidiary courts. There was none. There was a couple of people writing about it, a couple of people complaining about it, but no one on the left cared. There was no letter writing, there was no petitioning, there was no activism around it at all.
Because Merrick
And
Garland's a
then-
corporatist.
And then when people are put up for the court, there's barely a peep. And
Even on Janus.
well, I'm not even talking
Yeah.
about the rulings as so much as like, when you had different very progressive justices who were put up who were knocked down
Right.
by the Republicans, there was nary a peep. And so, electoral politics are not the end all be all, but when it comes time to vote, you should factor that in. And when it comes time to, what's getting you agitated, that should also factor.
There was
in.
always the two things for voting for Clinton over Trump, and there were many, but it was really simple. If you wanted to simplify it, you could just say Supreme Court picks and Iran deal. And those are the two things that have already been, among many, many others, obviously, but those were such clear dividing lines in terms of voting intelligently, and no one has any answers to those two. And they're both catastrophic.
Well, yeah, I don't think most people on the left are arguing against voting for Hillary Clinton. Like, that's not an interesting question to me or most of us, I would think. But the question then becomes, if
Well,
the
not
only,
most people, but all you needed was less than 70,000 people to go out and vote in 3 states.
But then what else are we supposed to do? Because
Okay, I think this is good. So there's another thing here which is not often discussed. Remember last night there was discussion of 400,000 people protesting, and you got very, very agitated when that was brought up, and civil
Here we go.
disobedience and general strikes and so on. There's been this entire plan, right, where if you don't show up to work one day, you're fired because you're at will. Wage is stagnant in real terms for 40 years. So even if you're not going to get fired because you go to do civil disobedience or participate in a general strike, you can't afford to do it. So there's this entire infrastructure where when we say, well, okay, you vote every 2 years or however often, but what else, right? Other than signing petitions and letter writing, the entire infrastructure is set up so that people really just can't go out and do what would be the next things to do.
Well, the idea of some type of wildcat strike around the Supreme Court, which is so crucial, has been never even contemplated. And yes, I agree. I wouldn't say most of the left, by any means, didn't take voting, for Clinton seriously, but we had an election where she lost by 70,000 votes over the course of 3 votes. I mean, 7,000 people, was it in Michigan? Or is it 11,000 or 10,000 in Wisconsin? A big part of that had to do with voter suppression. A big part of that voter suppression had to do with the Supreme Court gutting the Voting Rights Act.
David.
And, I mean, so I mean, just the idea of like protests, there should have been protests about the gutting of the Voting Rights Act. There should be people organizing about it. So,
David, how agitated was Sam on a scale of 1 to 10?
I'm having a hard time hearing Michael. What did he ask me?
David, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
About how agitated was Sam if you were going to use a 1 to 10 scale?
I mean, he was more agitated than I've maybe ever seen him in person. Or through audio-visual recordings.
The goddamn Supreme Court. But yeah, no, I mean, and the same would go for labor protections. The same would go for, I mean, the only thing that I think is maybe, well, it's not a validating criticism of the dumb perspective at all. But, you know, Democrats did use the sort of the Supreme Court in a non-affirmative way in elections, right? Like, not here's what we might want to do with who we put on the Supreme Court, but simply we will put on people who aren't absolute monsters, which is true and is enough of a reason to vote for them in a general election. Well, but maybe, again, there does need to be maybe more of a strategic, proactive vision for what a progressive court could look like, right?
Yes,
well, look,
absolutely. And I will say that a certain percentage of the Democrats, I don't know if it's 30% or 35% or 25%, are quite happy for the court to roll back.
Yes.
You know, consumer protections, worker protections, regulatory schemes, because then they don't have to, right? And so, you know, we had, I don't know how many Democrats voted, maybe a half a dozen voted to roll back Dodd-Frank. And, you know, they can do it because it's quiet and nobody pays that much attention to it. And, but this is a problem. I mean, and this is a problem because the left is not, and again, by the left I mean from the center to the far left, and for some of them that's just not, you know, what their shtick is. But the bottom line is the implications of the Supreme Court are just not appreciated broadly by the left. I mean,
dumb left is an ad hominem, though. We're not supposed to say that.
I enjoyed saying that.
All right, wait, what did Jamie what?
So I actually talked to my friend who's in the DSA's legal working group the other day, and he listens to the show. I think he's called in before, and he was talking about some of the real structural barriers to setting up a left version of something like the Federalist Society.
Absolutely.
Which is, I mean, he could probably call in and tell you more, but like the career path to being even considered to be nominated for a judgeship involves being a prosecutor, which mostly means putting black people in jail. So right there, no matter how much legal aid you've done on the other side, that is a structural check on how progressive you're going to be as a judge. And like there are all kinds of other ways people start out as, you know, progressive young lawyers who want to do right by the world and end up being much more conservative and much more establishment.
Well, I mean, I think that's accurate, but the job for the broad left is to also make sure that the apparatus is such that we're not allergic to those people, right? I mean, certainly we have examples of people who are on the left of center, who are prosecutors. You know, 3 or 4 of them are sitting on that Judiciary Committee. They exist, certainly, but
I'm talking about probably to the left of that, like, I don't know.
Well, I understand, but I'm talking about the broad left. I'm talking about the broad left. I mean, I don't know, you know, the membership of DSA is what now, like 40, 50,000 people, 30,000?
About 50,000.
50 plus.
So, okay, so
it's going to need to coalition with other people, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And there just has to be a bigger awareness of the importance of the courts, and there isn't. And I know that.
Well, maybe there would be if you and David didn't smear fucking Tulsi Gabbard.
Well, I think one advantage to being
So we could go to war with fucking Syria. And that's the whole point. The fucking corporate Democrats, they say, don't vote your conscience. And then we have fucking war, and Tucker Carlson said so.
It does seem like we actually are starting to gear up for Mattis this week, I think it was.
Yeah.
Announced a greater military presence in Syria.
Absolutely.
Exactly, and here's a clip of Hillary Clinton saying something in 2010. That's the whole fucking point.
Well,
Yeah.
I do think the anti-capitalist left has to draw the line somewhere, right? Like, the DSA engages in targeted electoral campaigns. We do not issue blanket endorsements for all Democrats, right? Like,
How does that connect, though?
Some Democrats, going back to the voting and the being aware of who's going to be president, right?
I'm not saying the DSA needs to make endorsements of Democrats. That's not at all what I'm saying.
Okay, because I think people
I'm saying
sometimes
the broader left needs to have a greater awareness of the importance of courts, and
No,
that
I
shouldn't
agree
make
with you about
anybody
that.
defensive. That should not make you defensive about justifying what the DSA position is about endorsements. I am not talking about just 50,000 people. I mean, I'm talking about the, tens of millions of people who, engage in politics in some measure or another. There's a broad responsibility to understand the implications of the courts. And certainly, I get very agitated, as I may have at dinner last night, with people who just casually dismiss the relevance of the courts and focus on other things like, the curve of a smile when you talk about Medicare or something like that.
Oh, no,
Like
I absolutely
You
agree
see how
with you on
Kamala
that.
Harris is nodding her head here? Isn't that super fucking corporatist?
I agree with you about that. I just think it's important to make it clear that when you say that, you're not saying that what that means is that the left should just focus on getting Democrats elected above all else.
It's not above all else. It's above very specific other things, right? Like, it's contextual to some degree.
Of course.
It's above some incredibly stupid arguments that people are still trotting out to build their own delusional personal brands.
Okay, but can you see...
It has nothing to do with what you're talking about.
Can you see how
one way or
people might
another.
take that the wrong way, though?
I mean,
I
but
think
that's
there
on
are
them
some
to research.
We know some of those people.
Right. Yeah, we know those people.
That's all
They're
I'm
having
saying.
it the wrong way right now, I'm sure.
I'm not saying don't weigh anything else. I am saying that there has been a complete undervaluing of the court in our society,
Right.
and that is highly problematic. And I think the argument's going to be clearer when either Kavanaugh or if it ends up being was it Wendy Barrett or whatever her name is ends up on the court, and maybe people will start to be able to connect like, oh, here's why public sector unions have been devastated. Oh, here's why there's no bank regulations.
Or maybe
here's
potentially...
why the air is significantly more polluted than it was 5 years ago.
Or to interject, Sam, it maybe even more so, really dangerously, is let's play a positive scenario. Bernie Sanders elected president. There's some type of this, and that would be far more beyond electoral for those things to happen. There would need to be the type of, broad mobilization. And then Medicare for all, okay, in this scenario, it's passed. A Kavanaugh-Roberts court is striking that down. There's no doubt that an actual left agenda that was passed in Congress and mobilized for in street action would run full stop against an oligarchic Supreme Court.
So even in these much more idealistic fantasy scenarios.
Forget about Bernie Sanders. When President Ocasio-Cortez is inaugurated 20 years from now, and she moves to, to go to a perfect single-payer situation, to nationalize the banks, to expropriate the oil refineries, and the court goes, no.
Right.
I mean, this will be the same court.
And this happens. That we actually can see examples of this, of those agendas conflicting in other countries. So I think, and again, I feel like what also frustrates me is what you guys are saying. And certainly, what I'm saying is pay more attention to the court includes have term limits on the court, potentially pack the court, make it much more democratically accountable and transparent. That's part of the point.
I think part of it is now is like understanding the importance of the court would lead. You'd see activism and agitation about term limits, or about packing the court. Like I say, not my preferred reform. It's not really reform, but I think it would be very helpful to have a very large movement in this country saying pack the courts, where an 18-year term limit ends up being the compromise position. I think that's super important. On Monday. Depending on my babysitter situation, because the kids are out of school, we may run an interview I did with Carol Anderson, and
on voting rights.
On voting rights, but really the interview ended up, because she wrote that book about white rage, and which was all about black people in this country getting some measure of rights, and then white people pushing back institutionally, and maybe 2 steps forward, 1.5 steps back type of situation. And then the parallels between what the court did back then, and by back then I mean pre-Jim Crow, Jim Crow and post, again, sort of like mid-Reconstruction, post-Reconstruction, through to the 60s.
Right.
Like this regime lasted for 70 years.
Right.
A regime of voter suppression lasted 70 years. And so I don't know that people, fully appreciate, the era that we could be entering into.
Yeah, but Ocasio-Cortez endorsed Andrew Cuomo, which shows you it's fucking corporations, and that's why they want war with fucking Syria. And Tucker Carlson is the only one that says Amazon is bad, because you're fucking neoliberal sellouts.
All right. You need a palate cleanser.
Well, look.
I actually am really enjoying this.
We can do all of those things, right? Like, we need a diversity of tactics and a separation of that. That's a bad analogy. I'm not going to make. But like the people on the progressive left liberals, social democrats, absolutely should be doing more activism around the judiciary. The people on the far left should be doing street actions around it, and we have been. So, I think those things can all go together.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm in no way making an indictment of the far left in this. I keep saying over and over again, from the center through the entire left.
And the indictment is of the dumb left, which if you guys don't want to do ad hominems, or just dumb-dumbs, just dumb-dumbs.
It's not just the dumb left. It is
Dummies.
Also, there's a lot more people, frankly, in the center to the, who identify as liberals, who, again, do not appreciate the implications of the court. I mean, this is a problem, and I don't know how else to articulate this other than keep saying the center throughout the entire left.
The fucking center.
It's especially a problem relative to the focus the right has on it, right? Like if the right,
this is the important point.
If the right wasn't if the right knows what the left doesn't about it, and that's the problem.
Yes. And that's, I mean,
they subordinated everything to that. Some of them really were sincerely like, Donald Trump is a repulsive, disgusting human being, and there's one reason to vote in November: the court.
And that
while Democrats were running and center to left, whatever terms, were running around in circles thinking about nonsense.
And that power strategy is undeniable for them.
Yes,
and they win that way, and that's what matters: winning.
Yeah, I agree.
I think David Pakman has had about four 4 words that you've been able to say during the course of this?
And
Well,
two
he
of
was
them were
asking
dum-dum.
questions.
He's just asking questions.
He's just asking
No, listen,
questions.
you have got a ton of people in that studio.
We roll deep at the Majority Report.
We didn't even give Brendan a microphone.
Brendan
Oh,
is
he's
on
got
the mic.
one.
Yeah,
I have one.
Brendan,
But there's been a lot of good points that I share, so I didn't want to inundate David with all these other people.
I mean,
Well,
you
listen.
saw people packing Grand Central Station the other night. Sorry, I'll let you talk. There've been a lot of protests.
but like, I mean, cool. But so what?
Yeah,
You
I'm
know,
not.
like, I mean, it's great, but it doesn't matter.
I think I'm just saying people are getting more activated around this issue, and you're going to continue to see it.
I hope so. I hope so.
I mean,
Well, it's been a pleasure being with you. And no, listen, Politicon. Politicon.
Oh yeah, I guess we should talk about
Yeah.
that. What are you doing at Politico?
I have no idea.
You have no idea.
I think I'm on anytime that there's like something huge going on, like for example when Cenk is debating Tucker Carlson, that's when I'll be scheduled to do a really obscure 6-person panel in the basement of the building. So that's my schedule for Politicon. And I honestly, I still don't even know what I'm doing.
You should do a segment on how to be a fucking sellout.
Oh my god.
I think every panel is essentially that, according to some people.
You got to hear
You guys
the Bill
are on
Clinton.
the panel together, actually.
Oh yeah, what's the panel?
Should we be socialists?
Is that actually happening?
That sounds
It's
fun.
on the schedule.
I think so.
You know, they have no socialists on that panel.
Who's on the
I was
panel?
I was texting with Kyle Kulinski, and so I think that was slated to be me, Kyle Kulinski, Anna Kasparian, Bakari Sellers, and I think that's it, the 4 of us, and you're moderating.
Yeah.
And so Kyle said, well, my view is basically your view. I'm a social democrat. And I said, oh, okay. Is Anna a socialist? He goes, no. And I'm like, okay, well, Bakari Sellers is definitely not. So they're doing a panel on socialism with no socialists.
Right. I got to be honest. I don't take Politicon seriously.
Okay.
I'm not
Really?
going to lie.
Well-
Wow.
I
didn't realize that.
I am excited to debate Charlie Kirk.
Right.
And if I have to go and sit on a panel
Or moderate one.
or moderate one, fine. That's great.
Yeah, Sam, you
Is there
got to get
gonna
ready
be-
for President Pence, too.
Yes, I'm doing a panel on Vice President Pence.
Oh, really? Who's
Yeah.
that
Becoming
with?
president.
I have no idea.
Oh.
I don't take it seriously.
Ann Coulter?
I don't know. I just, I'm assuming they're going to give us lunch.
I
That-
am not assuming that.
Well, as long as I get lunch,
They're not going to give you lunch? Jesus.
I've
Well-
seen nothing about lunch.
This has to be lunch.
Okay,
Now we're taking a very Jewish turn in the conversation.
assuming that there is lunch, you can tell them I'm available if they want a real socialist.
Yes, they don't. They don't care. They don't care about any of it.
The socialism panel definitely doesn't have lunch. I thought you meant like in general, like they might give you lunch.
No, I just
Can we have nosh while we talk about socialism?
All right. I just don't. I don't care about it. No one's. It doesn't implicate anything.
We got to cut this
Sam,
up.
do you want to hear the copy
Can
for,
we cut this up into a
President
promo?
Pence?
I don't
Do I-
care about
no,
it.
I
It
don't
doesn't
even
mean
wanna hear the
anything. Come to
It's
Politicon.
pretty bad.
No,
2018.
I would go to see me debate Charlie Kirk.
Right.
Right.
That's going to be fun. The panels, if
Less
people
fun.
don't go to the panels, then
And that debate's not scheduled to be like in the second kitchen for the custodial staff of the building. They're doing it in like a legitimate room for you.
Wow.
I don't know the details,
Okay.
but
I would ask.
I know. I mean, as long as there's video of it, I just sit in a room. I'll take Charlie Kirk to dinner, and someone's videotaping. I should say Pacman was videotaping last night, and I told him he cannot release that.
Siri-
highly inappropriate at the
David,
middle of a
David, hit me on the side.
I'll send you the video, Sam, and you can make the call. as
No,
to-
it's just not appropriate.
No, it's not appropriate to watch me terrorizing a table about the Supreme Court.
The restaurant had started clearing
All right,
out by that.
Let's talk a little. All right, I just want to hit on a couple of points.
Yeah.
How much have you dug into this supposed NAFTA reform?
Some.
Your sense?
Well, it's definitely no longer called NAFTA.
That's correct.
Yeah, but there's some tweaks, like 62.5% of car components used to have to be made in the 3 countries to avoid tariffs. That's now 75% in the USMCA. Is that a brand new deal? Like, if NAFTA was the worst deal ever, does going from 62.5% to 75%, is that mind-blowingly different? Not really. There's intellectual property stuff where copyright will persist 70 years beyond the life of the copyright holder versus 50. I don't know that that's even the right direction.
No, that's the wrong direction.
Right,
Without
exactly.
a doubt, increasing that is bad for consumers, for artists, for everybody.
Public health has implications for pharmaceuticals.
Public
Indeed,
health.
yes.
One of Trump's complaints with TPP was that the conflicts between the parties were going to be adjudicated in this kind of transnational, extrajudicial whatever.
Right. This is the corporate resolution IDES. I can't remember exactly.
That's basically like another version of that is how the 3 countries, U.S., Mexico, and Canada, Trump complained NAFTA doesn't allow for holding anybody accountable if they violate the agreement. The way that now it can be done would be through basically the same type of board that TPP would have put in place, which I thought Trump was against. It's a gong show.
Right, and to the extent that there was any of those other changes in terms of like the car stuff, that was all part of the TPP.
Well, yes, right.
That had been negotiated with Canada and Mexico as part of the TPP.
Yeah.
And that was just language that was lifted from there.
Yep.
There is actually some enhanced labor protections for
the
Mexico.
$16 an hour thing, right? Yeah.
Right.
And I think, and Zach Carter, we did the illicit history of trade for my show, and what he said is, there are some people inside the Trump administration, which specifically on issues like that are considering some relatively, leftward moves. And the reason literally is, a white ethno-state. But it's the soft side of the cruelty and racism of immigration policy. It's that, if labor is less exploited and less abused in Mexico, there's less incentive to come here. So it's okay. It's the right policy for the most obscene reasons imaginable, but it is an interesting policy shift.
Yeah.
All right. Well, David, we've got to get to a couple of the lawyer interviews that I did.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. We didn't have a chance to talk about how the Trump administration wants to weaken mercury regulations, but who doesn't want a little extra mercury?
Here's a clip of Bakari Sellers talking about mercury in 2010. Maybe you could just smear Tulsi Gabbard more. Fucking sellout.
All right, look, let's take a quick break and then run this interview with Mike Berg, who talks about the explosions in Massachusetts. And then we will come back and throw to the Bobby Kennedy interview. David Pakman, DavidPakmanShow.com.
Right. DavidPakman.com.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Nice. Congratulations
Thank you.
Scoring that URL. All right, DavidPakman.com. Obviously, you can find him on YouTube, youtube.com/The
David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show. Congratulations on that one.
Thank you.
All right, folks, quick break, and we'll be right back with Mike Berg. Sitting with me now at the Mass Torts Conference 2018, Nevada, Las Vegas, Mike Berg from the law firm
Berg, Simpson, Eldridge, Hirsch, and Jardine.
And Mike, you and I have talked in the past. You've done a lot of, construction litigation, faulty.
Mass Tort been the lead lawyer in the Yaz and the Ortho Ever and the Zyprexa litigation, Pradaxa.
Okay, so what are you working on now?
I think there's something that people should really know about that we're working on now. With the Kavanaugh hearing and the hurricane, the very little news came out about these gas explosions that occurred north of Boston in the Lawrence and Andover area. These explosions were not one explosion of one building. These were explosions of multiple buildings along the main and feeder lines of the gas company, Columbia Gas. It's the most outrageous thing I've ever seen. I've tried numerous gas explosion cases around the country, have handled more than 50 gas explosions. This is the worst conduct I've ever seen by a gas company.
What? Okay, give us a sense of, and I don't think people appreciate this. This is when you say it went across these two towns. It wasn't where they were joining. I mean, it literally, like, how many miles span were houses subjected to just blowing up?
Probably between 3 and 5 miles. It's it's unbelievable. And the reason, and this is really such an amazing situation, is in 2004, the gas company got acquired. At that time, we have memos showing that they knew that these lines, these old steel lines, which had been around for more than 50 years, needed to be replaced. They had leaks, they had corrosion, and they knew they were dancing with the devil if they didn't do it.
And so this is Columbia Energy, and they are bought out by National Grid. Is that what happened?
Well, they were bought out by a company out of Ohio, which bought them. Is a holding company that now owns Columbia Gas, but we hold both responsible, and they knew in memos that they needed to repair and replace these lines. They knew there were leaks in these lines. They knew that if they didn't do it and didn't do it really quickly, there were going to be potential problems. And what people don't understand about the delivery of natural gas is that it's lighter than air. So if you have leaks, what happens to it, it tries to get above ground. It'll go ahead and permeate along the line. And if you have multiple leaks along the line, which is what they had here, ultimately that gas will find a way to get out, whether it's through cracks in the basement, whether it's in a house, whether it's in a store. And when it does, and you get the right mixture of oxygen and natural gas, and it can be from a pilot light, it can be from a boiler, it can be from static electricity. You now have an ignition source, and the next thing you know, you have a catastrophic explosion, which there's deaths, there's people who are burned.
How many deaths were we talking about?
We know of at least 3 at this point in time. We have probably a half dozen people that have been burned. But even beyond that, these people have been evacuated from their house. And what's interesting is you have the town of Lawrence, which is one of the poorest towns in Massachusetts, and then you have Andover, is one of the richest, right next door. And these poor people, the ones in Lawrence, they were evacuated. They couldn't get back to their home. They have no gas. They have no electricity. They got to go stay with somebody, a friend, outside of the explosion area. Most of them suffer from PTSD. Most of them have incredible damages, keeping them from being able to go in and go back to what would be a normal life. Gas still has not been restored.
Wow.
People have still not been able to get to their property.
Well, here's what strikes me. There's a couple of things. And so if I understand you correctly, the gas will leak in one place, and it will just sort of lay across the pipe until it finds a seep that it can go up.
Correct.
And presumably, there were multiple of these over that 3 to 5 mile stretch.
Right.
And then at one point, whatever it was, made it pop up, or the gas found one leak that put it to another level, and then they were able to go to the home?
What we do know of a couple of things, because we're still in the early stages,
right,
because it just happened within the last 30 days. What we do think is that the gas pressure went down, and then the company increased the gas pressure in the main line.
So the gas pressure goes down because there's less gas because of the leaks. They pump up the pressure, which then pushes the pressure on those leaks to find more crevices.
Right, and makes it even worse because when you have corrosion, I mean, it can happen not only from corrosion, and that's at this point we have a metallurgist that's looking at it, but we also know people don't realize if you have a construction vehicle, a backhoe, or a shovel that just nicks that line, with the freeze thaw that occurs up in Massachusetts and in other places, you're going to get that steel pipe is going to become brittle. And you may have had, and we don't know yet because we haven't gotten all the information, a catastrophic fracture where the pipe itself breaks open. And maybe there's multiple catastrophic fractures that occurred.
Okay, but clearly that piping, that infrastructure is old.
Yes.
You have memos that suggest that,
Yes.
like, we have old stuff. You guys are buying us, but we should just tell you in full disclosure we have old stuff. And so the holding company is responsible because they are aware of it. The existing company is responsible. But how do we know 10 miles down the line past Andover or 20 miles west into Worcester? I mean, why are we to believe that any of this stuff is safe?
I don't think there is. I mean, one of the things, I handled a case up in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, in which a whole city block blew up. One of the things, we actually went to trial. One of the things that was very interesting was I was able to ask the people in the gas company, how many more, I said time bombs, drew an objection. I said, okay, how many more explosions are there under the ground that you don't know about? And the answer is, we don't know. After the case, and we got a very, very large verdict for the injured people in that case, a multi-million-dollar verdict, the jury went to city council and demanded that they replace the entire gas system. And I'm going to tell you, I've talked to the Boston Globe, I've talked to people in Boston, they better be demanding that there's a full and complete looking at the system, as you said, all the way along the line.
Is there a mechanism in the context of the case that you're doing? I mean, chances are you're going to settle, maybe, but who knows? But can that be worked into a settlement or a verdict where it's there's a responsibility to the community?
I think yes. I think that the city council, I know that I was interviewed when they were having a city council meeting in Boston about whether or not this could happen in Boston. And I basically said, yes, it can, and it's more probable than not because these lines, they're structurally inferior. There are now new kinds of pipes that don't have the same kind of problem. And to leave them in the ground where you have corrosion, where you have potentially these lines have been hit, and under the DOT regulations, the only testing that they're required to do when the line is up is some sort of above ground tester. That's not going to find those leaks. What you have to do, knowing that you have these leaks, is you have to start uncovering those lines, and you need to start replacing them.
Period.
And you can't wrap them. We had in the Steamboat case, I had another explosion up in Cody, Wyoming, where it got struck and they wrapped it. Well, that's not going to help you when that fracture occurs.
Right.
And you're going to have in that case, an apartment building went up. What's unusual about this is we don't have just this one giant explosion that occurred like in the two cases I've mentioned. You have these multiple explosions that occurred.
That really suggests to me there are large stretches of line that could be a problem.
Absolutely.
I mean, it seems to me it's the functional equivalent of like you build like a little housing cul-de-sac, you do it all in 1970 and you put a 25-year roof on it, and around 1994 one roof fails. Maybe a couple others last another year or two, but they're all going to go around that time.
Yeah, and I think but even worse, and I like your analogy, but here people's lives are in danger every day, and anybody who lives in that area who understands the truth about it should be very fearful. When is the next explosion going to occur? When are they going to replace these lines? And I'm going to tell you, they had a plan in place back in 2004. But they do talk about how much money it's going to cost them to replace these lines. And they knowingly delayed it. So we went from 2004 to 2018. And they had plenty of time to fix this so these people would not be going through what they're going through.
You do that now. I mean, it's all about shareholder value, right? Because if we expend more money, where are our profits? We're just eating into profits because we're investing in the future. Shareholders want their payoff now, and so this is one of those things.
There's another twist that I want to make sure everybody understands. In Massachusetts, the Public Utilities Commission entered into an agreement with the gas company, and there was a thing in there called the tariff. And in the tariff, they attempted to limit the liability of the gas company for anything like this. And they did it without the consumer's knowledge, without the consumer's knowing, in which it says they're not going to be responsible for anything that occurs with regard to the gas line. And the argument was, well, we're going to keep your gas prices lower that way. All that did was incentivize the company not to do the repairs they needed to do.
Well, if they're not liable, then yeah.
And we believe, because there is some case law in which they've enforced the tariffs in a subrogation case, that the tariff has to be reasonable. And under these circumstances, this company has to be held responsible not only for the damage that it caused, the injuries that it caused, but also consequential damages, and in this case, it is our opinion, punitive damages.
So, Mike, when do you bring in activists? I mean, you said a jury went to their city council and said that, but like, this seems to me to be one of those situations where activists would become aware of this tariff and agitate against this and make their lawmakers.
They should be brought in now, and we're trying, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this show, and I've been on radio and I've been on television. I talked to the Boston Globe, is to let these people know that we're out here to help them, not only from the standpoint if you've been injured or displaced, ever you have, you didn't have insurance, but to actually get involved and demand that they go and start digging up this gas system, because, people may not have an idea of when you have a natural gas explosion, the incredible damage that it does. It's worse than a fire, because what happens is when that gas ignites, it'll blow the entire buildings to bits. In one of them that I was involved in, the flames went up almost 100 feet because that gas is continuing to pour into that mixture, and that fire continues to burn.
Mike Berg, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate being on. Thanks, Sam.
Okay, that was Mike Berg, and we're going to take another break in a minute, and we will hear the interview I did with Bobby Kennedy. Just wanted to give an update on some of the news that I'm seeing in relationship to the Kavanaugh fight. The Super PAC, Priorities USA Action, which is, I don't know if it's the largest Democratic aligned, I guess, Super PAC, but this one says it is threatening Joe Manchin in terms of providing money, and has said it will not back Phil Bredesen in Tennessee over his election with Marsha Blackburn, because he came out and said that he would, in this situation, vote for Kavanaugh. But a part of the problem is the American public on some level, right? How much, and good for Priorities USA, but you can see the implications of what it has with Heitkamp, and it's great for Heitkamp, and I hope that it actually ends up helping her in the end, her stance, but we need to start forced relocation of some folks. So you guys look around the studio. There you go, Matt.
I'll go back when it pays enough. It's gonna be costly, I think.
I think the relocation services is a great idea, Sam. I will volunteer for Omaha. There's a lot of trees there.
Omaha, really?
A lot of good.
You want to be that flat?
I miss the Missouri River Valley, so I could go back out there.
All right, so we're
start
getting
a bike
somewhere.
share program, a farmer's market.
I don't know, buddy. You might need to go back to Jersey and make sure that criminal gets reelected.
Hey. Plead the fifth on that one. I used to work for his daughter.
Oh.
All right. Well, there you go.
There
you go. This is like a hotbed of corruption in that studio. All right. We, of course, are not going to hear from Susan Collins for, I guess, another 2 hours.
Leaving you all in suspense.
But let's take another quick break, and when we come back, Bobby Kennedy on the recent court case involving Monsanto, which is now owned by Bayer, as he'll tell us, and an interesting case involving Roundup. Let's go to that now. So joining me now at the Mass Torts 2018 conference in Las Vegas, Nevada, Bobby Kennedy, who is obviously a longtime a lawyer with the Waterkeeper, and now are you working with a specific firm on this one?
On
the Monsanto?
On the Roundup?
Yeah,
with Baum Hedlund.
Baum Hedlund, okay. And
the California firm.
Okay, and so, all right, tell us about this this Monsanto Roundup litigation, because I think there's a lot of questions that folks are aware of. New report, I think, out by the Europeans saying that there's reason to believe it is damaging to bees and bee colonies. There's been all sorts of questions about its overuse for like environmental issues and creating a monoculture. And then there's also, I think, intellectual property issues involving people having the ability to own their own seeds. What aspect of this have you guys been working on?
Well, we're open to litigate essentially on one aspect, which is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And as you point out, this chemical has a lot of problems with it, and really the problems have surfaced and the concern has surfaced because of overreaching by Monsanto. Monsanto was recommending Roundup. Roundup is a common name, the brand name for Monsanto's product, glyphosate. And for many years, and it's an herbicide, so it's used by Monsanto. It's used by farmers to kill weeds and avoid paying people to pull the weeds. But Monsanto really made its money. It's now 50% or 75% of the herbicide that's sprayed in America is Roundup. And around the world, it's probably got 80% of the world market. And the way that it got the market is by developing GMO plants that are Roundup resistant. So farmers, rather than individually spraying weeds, can now saturate the entire landscape with Roundup. It kills everything except for that target organism, the GMO, the Roundup Ready corn, the Roundup Ready soy, etc., which can grow through the toxic spray. But in 2006, Monsanto developed a new application, or essentially kind of an off-label application for Roundup, which was they started recommending to farmers that if you spray Roundup on crops just before harvest, it dries them out and makes them easier to harvest. So for the first time in history, Roundup was being sprayed not on seedlings, but directly on foods. And so now it's showing up everywhere. It's in milk, it's in mother's milk, it's in our children's cereal, it's in beer, it's in wine, it's in almost all the food, virtually all the corn that you can eat. It's in almost all the wheat. There is no such thing as Roundup Ready wheat. It's used on wheat as a desiccant, and because of that, it's now in all of our foods. And you're seeing this huge explosion of gluten allergies, which everybody is wondering, where did gluten allergies come from? When you and I were kids, there was no such thing as gluten allergies as far as we knew.
Right.
It was extremely rare, and today it's painfully common.
All right, well, wait. So let me ask you this. So just so people can follow this, right, there's three aspects to their business. One was to make a crop that allowed for...
Well, their first business, the original business was this is just a weed killer.
Right. Then they
and it was basically sprayed on individual weeds. You couldn't spray it on the corn itself because it would kill the corn too.
So they develop a...
and that was in like 74.
So they develop a corn so that you can completely saturate your field now.
You can
with this
spray
stuff.
it out of airplanes, and
there's we have some people have issues with GMO. Let's put those aside for a moment.
Well, GMO, people think a lot of the people who are concerned with GMO are dismissed because people say, aren't GMOs great because it's a way of making plants more productive?
Right.
But actually, if you look at GMOs, 95% of GMOs in the world are Roundup ready. So they actually increase the use of pesticides in our environment.
Well, that's right. That's what I'm saying. GMOs in and of themselves
the concept, hypothetically, of GMOs is a great concept.
Right.
Because, and it was promised by Monsanto and others, that this is going to reduce the amount of pesticides we need because you're going to be able to develop these new crops where you don't need pesticides.
But what it's actually done
is amplified
the use of it
extraordinarily.
And so then they saturate. I'm talking from their business perspective. We've now literally saturated the fields, but we've saturated our business opportunities. So let's take this same product that we're producing and find another use for it so that we can even expand our market even more. So it's not just you don't use it just once when it's a seedling to kill the weeds around it. Now you use it on things and you're not even using it as a pesticide or an herbicide, rather. You're using it as some type of like means in which to make it easier to harvest, which is like sort of the classic. We see this with like drug manufacturers all the time, right?
Off-label uses.
Yes, we've hit everybody who could use it for blood thinning, so now let's use it for hair loss or something, whatever it is. And so it's on this point that
so now it's starting to show up in everybody's foods.
Do we have records of where it was in terms of its saturation of humans versus where now? Where it
I
was?
don't know that, but I know that it really became an issue beginning in 2006 because for the first time we're spraying it on foods, and people started measuring at that point and saying it's showing up in our foods. FDA doesn't do that normally in the normal course of business, and
nobody's going into your doctor and saying,
nobody's
20 years ago, do I have glyphosate?
Nobody's doing that
in my blood.
Even the FDA's program for testing foods for herbicides and pesticides is vanishingly small.
Right.
But nobody's really looking for it, but now, because of the extraordinary proliferation, everybody's concerned, and we're starting to see disturbing things where we know that it's just the science has passed the inflection point where we know that it causes non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. But there's a lot of other illnesses that we believe are associated with it, and they run the gamut from obesity to Alzheimer's. Liver cancer, non-fatty liver cancer now is exploding, and it's exploding in populations we never saw it before, like in 10-year-old children.
Wow.
Non-alcoholic fatty liver cancer, and we believe there's strong science suggesting that that's coming from glyphosate. Glyphosate is a chelator, which means it removes the metals from and minerals, and it does that from plants. And in fact, nowadays, a bushel of corn weighs less than a bushel of corn did 15 years ago, because the
even
minerals.
If it's the same mass. I mean,
yeah, the same mass.
It doesn't matter,
because
right?
the minerals, which were the heaviest part of that corn cob, have been chelated out of the corn cob. So the corn's much less, it's not providing you
the same nutrition.
With nutrition.
Right.
Because the minerals are all gone, but it does that to the human body too, and it destroys the microbiome, which is one of the most important organs in your body. It controls your mood, it controls your immune system, and it creates inflammation in the brain. A lot of these problems, and these are only a fraction of the problems with glyphosate that people are seeing and that are on the horizon now for this company potentially to have to deal with. One thing that they've got to deal with is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, because in 2016, the International Agency for Cancer Research, which is a global agency, back in the 1970s or 80s, the governments got together and said, none of us have the ability to and the resources to determine what is a carcinogen and what isn't, and we really need an esteemed international group that is going to create those designations. So they created this group, and really it's a system. It's not a static group. They take the best cancer scientists in the world, independent scientists who don't have industry ties, and they bring them together on panels every year. And the panels look at specific compounds. So they'll look at benzene or specific molecules. So they'll look at benzene one year, they'll look at cigarette smoking and says, does that cause cancer? They'll look at, even they'll look at, certain occupations, like do people who work in the steel mills get cancer?
So they're assessing like statistics primarily.
And there's a number. It's very unusual because most countries you can't incorporate an outside finding in a statute, but countries all over the world, because IARC is so respected, will say anything designated by IARC as carcinogen will be treated as a carcinogen under our laws. So, for example, the state of California has Prop 65 that says if there's a carcinogen, you have to label it if it's before you put it into the stream of commerce. And they say, and that law says, for the purpose of determining what is a carcinogen, what isn't a carcinogen,
use IARC.
We rely on IARC. So if IARC says something's a carcinogen, there are 30 countries and 35 states that say under their laws it is treated as a carcinogen legally. And so IARC designated glyphosate a probable carcinogen for humans and a definite carcinogen for animals, and that triggered a cascade of new developments, of legal developments. It triggered, for example, all of these attorneys who suddenly began filing lawsuits on behalf of clients who had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma after exposures to glyphosate, and now today there are about, when we filed this case, there was about 4,000 of those lawsuits. Now there's about 9,000.
Wow.
And
so have these been brought together in like some type of MDL?
All the attorneys, yeah, and all the attorneys are working together, or they're coordinating strategies. The first case that went to trial was Dwayne Lee Johnson, who was a school groundskeeper in California, in Northern California, and he had been spraying Roundup for 2 years, and in a way that actually covered his body with Roundup. He was spraying huge amounts to kill the weeds on the school property, and he was very careful with it. The equipment that he had was malfunctioned a lot, and even though he would wear like a moon suit, Tyvek suit, he was getting saturated. And as it turned out, the Tyvek suit would trap the glyphosate inside his suit, and because he was sweating, it would actually penetrate his body much more effectively. And that's what the experts testified. And he got a very debilitating form of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma that is fatal. His doctors say that he has now less than a year to live. But it disfigured him a lot. His skin was, it was really, really disturbing looking. He was also a very good client. He's a wonderful man, and he has a very, very good presentation. He's very hardworking. He has a great family. He fell in love when he was in college, love at first sight, with a woman who had immigrated here from Mexico. They have 2 kids, and the wife testified, Araceli, and and he testified, and I think the jury really fell in love with him, and so it was a good case. And we ended up getting a $290 million verdict, $40 million for pain and suffering and compensatory damages, and then about $250 million for punitive damages in one case. And now Monsanto at that time was facing 4,000 other cases, but and as we predicted, they should have settled. The victory in that case has alerted other people that this
it sets some type of parameters.
Right.
So now
and
is
so
this
now
case
there's
being
close
appealed?
to 9,000 cases.
Now does Monsanto appeal this first case? They must.
Yeah, they're going to appeal, and they've already filed a number of appeals. But the first appeal is that the judge has the ability to reduce or to even to eliminate that jury judgment. I think it's going to be hard for her to do, even though she was not friendly to our case throughout the trial. But we picked a jury. There were 35 people excluded from the jury because they expressed some negative attitudes towards Monsanto, which is extraordinary in itself.
Right.
35 people. The jurors who were left over expressed no negativity toward Monsanto. It was a highly educated jury. Everybody on it had a college education. There were 2 working scientists on the jury. The level of attention, one of the jurors filled 5 notebooks with notes. All of the jurors took notes throughout the trial. They were all alert, and they asked extraordinarily detailed questions about specific rat studies and specific rats in those rat studies. So they were very, very well informed. And it would be, and the jury, the verdict was a rational one. It would be kind of a slap in the face of the American jury system if the judge went and meddled with that verdict after these people gave 2 months of their lives.
Right.
To come in and gave all that attention.
So what do you guys anticipate Monsanto does? They come out, they claim they're going to appeal.
The thing is that it's no longer Monsanto, it's Bayer, because Bayer, which is a German pharmaceutical company, and Bayer was the company that was a big supporter of Hitler's. It was it was called IG Farben at that time, and it made the Zyklon B gas that was used to exterminate Jews at Auschwitz, and it has a long history, but it's a huge chemical conglomerate now and pharmaceutical conglomerate. They purchased Monsanto for $66 billion in June. Wow. And right before this verdict came down. And Bayer stock had dropped 18%. And then it regained 4%. So it's the permanent injury from that lawsuit, from that verdict, is about 14%, which is billions and billions of dollars. And, I think Bayer, it looks like they did not do a due diligence on Monsanto, and their stockholders have a lot of reason to be angry at them. But now, because Monsanto had, when it negotiated its takeover with Bayer, said to Bayer, don't worry, we've put aside $250 million to deal with these lawsuits. So that, and all that money is gone.
All right. Well, let me ask you this: in the context of the original case, and presumably Bayer will appeal, and maybe they will prevail, maybe they won't. They'll negotiate. If there's at least 4,000 to 9,000 cases out there, they know they're going to have to go through this again. So they're probably sitting there trying to figure out some type of algorithm, like how much is this going to cost us? Like if we wanted this to go away, or maybe they'll just say we're just going to keep fighting this for eternity. It's just going to be one of our divisions is going to be protecting Bayer. Some law is going to be a law firm made by a law firm. But in the original case, what was the case centered on the fact that Monsanto must have known that their secondary spraying, that their new off-label use of glyphosate would
lead to this?
Well, no, Monsanto knew from the 70s that there was a lot of problems with, in fact, their original rat studies, when they were trying to get licensed, their original rat studies showed that the rats all got tumors. And Monsanto was able to strong arm EPA. As it turned out, Monsanto had a mole in the EPA's pesticide division who rose up and at the end was running the division. His name was Jess Rowland. And he was doing favors for Monsanto to block studies, to kill studies. And we got all those documents. So at one point, he's telling his Monsanto handler, if I can kill this study by another agency, you need to give me a medal. And then he goes out and he succeeds in killing it. So we had all these documents showing that Monsanto knew that it was carcinogenic or had reason to believe that and was killing the studies one after the other. And, that's one of the things the jury saw, and that's why they got punitive damages, because it was a knowing deception. Not only that, Monsanto not only successfully blocked, they were ghostwriting studies, they were bribing scientists, they had captured the regulatory agency. They had their own guy running the pesticide division in EPA, and we have proof of that. They were also, the thing they really were concerned about is they did not want any testing done on the whole compound. So they would allow testing on glyphosate, but they actually had things in the compound that appeared to be much more dangerous than glyphosate.
And probably the interaction of those.
They're called adjuvants.
Okay.
And those are the molecules that allowed glyphosate to penetrate the bark of the plant. They do the same thing with humans. If you get it, what the science indicates is that the worst thing that you can do with Roundup is to spray it. It's probably worse than eating the glyphosate, because the capacity of these surfactants or adjuvants penetrate your body and, very, very efficiently, and then, to cross all the internal barriers, including a blood-brain barrier in your body. So the stuff is really, the compound itself has not been tested, and we have all kinds of documents in which they're saying, we got to make sure that nobody tests the entire compound.
Wow. All right. Well, Bobby Kennedy, thank you for updating us on
Sam,
this.
really good to see you again.
Really
it's
good to see
great being back at Ring of Fire.
Oh, well, yes, I appreciate that. All right, Bobby Kennedy, folks, and we'll take a quick break. Be right back with more from Mass Torts 2018.
So that's Bobby Kennedy, and we will head into the fun half. It's now 1:35 Eastern Time. It is, I don't know what time it is here, 10:30 maybe. And we will hear from Susan Collins in about 90 minutes or so. And I got to say, I just, one last, I guess, opportunity to hear from you guys on the free show. It's just hard for me to believe that Susan Collins is going to make such a production of voting yes, of doing the sort of less.
Bless you.
Excuse me.
Bless
the less, I guess, brave vote, right? I mean, I don't think that's just my perspective. I think objectively speaking, for her to vote against, for any person to vote against their party, maybe brave is not the right word. It is more controversial than voting with your party. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why you would want that. On the other hand, she comes out today at 3 and says she is voting for Kavanaugh. It takes the pressure off of Manchin to vote for Kavanaugh on some level. Because if she votes for Kavanaugh, then Mike Pence ends up being the then it's a done deal anyways. So his vote is sort of irrelevant tomorrow. But I guess we will see. I mean, I have just successfully convinced myself that she will vote against Kavanaugh and successfully convinced myself that she will vote for Kavanaugh's confirmation.
I'm playing chess against myself.
And it's a total stalemate. But I mean, those are the two. You know, those are the two. Those are the two reasonings as to why you would see her announce at 3 p.m.
I think she's going to vote against. Maybe, I don't know why. No, I mean, actually, I think it's just. I think that if she was going to vote for him, she would just do it, get it over with, and announce it, and sort of end the drama. I don't see the advantage for prolonged drama in a yes vote for her.
Well, the advantage is she gets to say, oh, there was an investigation and they didn't find anything.
No, but I'm saying she should have done that yesterday.
Oh, well, yeah.
Then it would be like, yeah, when she said it was thorough, then she could have just been like, all right, here I am. I'm going to, but she's been.
I think Jamie could be right. I mean, I
even
think,
if,
you know, this
for
is
another day,
this is,
though, of pressure on her. I mean, what's the advantage of that?
Well, I mean, 3 p.m. is, you know, the another day of pressure, but now she is guaranteed a platform in which to justify her vote.
Yeah, she'll look like she did her due diligence.
But, you know, who is she justifying her vote for?
Right.
I haven't seen what the Kavanaugh numbers are in Maine, but if they are even remotely close to what the rest of the country in more less Trumpful states, the numbers have to be running against Kavanaugh, I would imagine, in Maine. That would be my guess. So, you know, maybe I just, who is she trying to justify a yes vote to? I mean, a no vote to. I guess, you know, we'll see. I don't know.
Right.
That's the long and short of it. Do we have a Jimmy Reefer Cake song? Maybe
Yes.
the insight lies in Jimmy Reefer Cake, who is, in fact, a maniac himself, a Maine citizen.
It might be in the song because it's called The Dankest Truth from Outer Space.
The dankest truth from out of space. Okay, well, let's hear that song. Oh, before we do, folks, just a reminder, jointhemajorityreport.com, jointhemajorityreport.com. Your support makes this show possible. This past week, we had a Tuesday. Tuesday existed this week. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. As I was saying, this week did include a Tuesday, which means that it included a Tuesday night, which means that it included a Michael Brooks show. In fact, not just a Michael Brooks show, but the Michael Brooks show. Michael, who was on that show?
Daniel Bessner, who is author of Democracy in Exile, Rise of the Defense Intellectual, and author of a recent op-ed in the New York Times on a left foreign policy, like what that would actually look like programmatically. We talked about the European Union. We talked about China and Africa. We talked about why the concept of national security, just like the economy, is sort of a myth, and how to actually disaggregate what we're actually talking about. It was great, and we took a lot of questions in the post-game on the mechanics of how a left-wing foreign policy actually comes together, and also, of course, touched on what's going on in Brazil, which Daniel just got back from. Patreon.com/TMBS. Next Tuesday, Alex Perrine.
Jamie, the Intifada.
Yeah, so this week we had on artist and journalist Molly Crabapple. That episode is out now. We talked about DIY disaster relief and mutual aid and austerity resistance in Puerto Rico. We also talked a little bit about how our sex worker comrades are resisting Sesta Fosta and fighting for safety and dignity. We also looked back a little bit on our own time in the naked girl business, which is actually how me and Molly know each other. Also, Sean reminded me that our patron goal bonus is out now. That is the first and possibly only episode of our cooking show, Acid Kitchen. So check it out, folks, for your psycho culinary delight. It's for patrons.
And Matt, literary hangover this week?
Yeah, there's going to be a brand new one out this weekend on Corey Robin's The Reactionary Mind, where we will apply Corey Robin's book to the zero-sum debate that Majority Report had. There's a very relevant portion of that book, and I'm not going to spoil anything. Check it out this weekend if you want to hear about that.
It's a zero-sum game.
All right, let's hear the Jimmy Reefer Cake offering for the week.
Aliens came down and they gave you something bad. Now everybody's gonna get it. The dankest truth from outer space will blow your mind and melt your face. Forget the bubble that you live in. They will all be forgiven. Where's the truth? When did it die? Like Kavanaugh, they all pose and lie. Partisan claim, hypocrisy no longer matters. Are you kidding me? The strain I suggest to you, as in these nuggets that I call truth. The dankest truth from outer space will blow your mind and melt your face across the globe. They will consume my strain of truth just like food. Because they need me. You take yourself too seriously if you consume my strain of truth. I believe it can help you. Because within this strain you learn to feel another human being's pain and not let it hurt you too. A school bus in Yemen is bombed. The truth is sadly always wrong. But let this string tickle your brain. Laugh to keep from going insane. With all the he said, she said, the horse is getting beaten dead. Fox, MSNBC, CNN lie about the people who are hurt and die. Why these regime change wars? I'm telling you, it's time to change the course. The strain I suggest to you is in these nuggets that I call true. The dankest truth from outer space will blow your mind and melt your face. The dankest truth from outer space. 'Cause you need me, you take yourself too seriously if you consume my strain of truth. I believe it can help you, because with this strain you learn to feel another human being's pain and not let it hurt you too. The dankest strain from outer space will blow your mind and melt your face. Melt your face. Gonna motherfucker melt your face. Melt your face, motherfucker, melt face. Melt your motherfucker face. Face, get rid of your face. Right in your face. Melt that shit. Melt it.
Rocking out.
Wow, that was really a throwback.
That was like at your time when you were not knowing who Ace of Base was.
Yeah, exactly. That was,
We
good
gotta,
stuff.
We got to
Good
get
stuff,
that
Jimmy
song
Reefer
to
Cake.
Susan Collins. We'll speak to her conscience.
Exactly. Dankest outer space will melt your face.
The dankest truth.
Just also one thing to look out for, the trial of Jason Van Dyke, who is the cop who shot Laquan McDonald in Chicago. Folks recall that video from now a year and a half ago, maybe. That, my understanding is that the verdict is supposed to come down really any minute, and it could be a real mess in Chicago. So keep an eye on that. In the meantime, we will take a break. head into the fun half. 646-257-3920. We will take your calls and your IMs. See you in a moment. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. It is the fun half of the program wherein we take your phone calls, take your IMs, and play a little sound, audio, and video. I am trying to find the IMs on my machine. I'm vacillating back and forth. I know that, but I'm starting to believe that Collins is going to vote no. Just don't see why she would make such a big deal about voting yes.
Like, do a drum roll.
But we will find out within an hour and 15 minutes.
And with that confidence said, are you just as confident that Manchin will also vote no as a result of that?
I mean, Manchin has to know how Collins is going to vote. And for him, he's going to want to downplay this vote. Although I don't know how her announcing it would put focus on him. Although, he's a Democrat. And it is, you get more attention if you vote against your party than with your party. But because the big story is going to be Collins.
I think that the other thing too is,
I just don't see how Manchin,
unless Manchin's negotiating defecting to the Republicans right this second, which is the other thing that could be happening right now,
which would be
I mean, no matter how it splits up between those people, I just have a feeling that the power is on Kavanaugh's side, and it's
without
on
a doubt.
Trump's side.
For sure.
And that's what makes me think that he's getting through.
Well, we will have a better notion in an hour and 10 minutes, but maybe we won't have a better notion in an hour and 10 minutes, right? I mean,
I'm keeping you all in suspense.
but the good news is that we've found out exactly who is behind these protests with Kavanaugh. It is not folks who are concerned about the environment. It's not folks who are concerned about the Chevron doctrine, the idea that regulatory agencies can actually do their job. It's not folks who are worried about his potential attempted rape or the fact that he lied on multiple occasions to the Senate Judiciary Committee, ranging from the Manny Miranda scandal back when he was in the Bush administration to many aspects of his addressing the question of that attempted rape. There are no Americans, ladies and gentlemen, who are protesting Brett Kavanaugh who are not doing so because of George Soros. Here is Chuck Grassley with Maria Bartiromo, the President Trump's, I think, greatest fan in the media, if possible.
Well, Dobbs is
quite the gauntlet there.
Yeah, I know, but
she's very fair. She's fair. She's super fair.
Let's hear Grassley with Bartiromo. I mean, this also suggests to me that they maybe know that they're going to lose the vote because Soros is the last refuge. But
what's gone on here, Senator? I mean, you've had people thrown out of restaurants. You've had people shamed and criticized online, and obviously protesters in your face. First off, do you believe George Soros is behind all of this, paying these people to get you and your colleagues in elevators or wherever they can get in your face?
I have heard so many people believe that. I tend to believe it. I believe it fits in his attack mode that he has and how he uses his billions and billions of resources. I think it promotes incivility in American society, but I also think that the resistance that's been in existence since November 2016 is headquartered here on Capitol Hill. When you have congresswomen say that you get in the face of anybody that's in the cabinet, we have senators say get in the face.
Resistance.
He's been doing French Duolingo.
That's how Soros presents it, and I'm tired.
I mean, they are, to a certain extent, I mean, it is so rote that, we don't pay much attention to it, but the idea that they have to say that the protest and the anger against Kavanaugh, because they see the polls, right? I mean, and it's not just Democrats who are against the nomination of Kavanaugh. Independents, people who are not terribly politically active against the nomination of Kavanaugh. I mean, George Soros is rich, but I will say this, I haven't gotten a dime from Soros, and it's getting a little bit tiresome to see him spread this money around. Somehow he doesn't have my address.
Did you see Trump's tweet about this that I think Grassley was responding to?
Put the tweet up. Wait, Grassley's responding to...
No, Grassley was on first.
Oh, Grassley was on first.
80 minutes before that.
Okay.
So after Grassley, we see this tweet from Donald Trump, which says, "The very rude elevator screamers are paid professionals only looking to make senators look bad."
Exactly.
They're paid professionally to be rape survivors, apparently, according to Donald Trump. Don't fall for it. Also, look at all the professionally made identical signs paid for by Soros and others. These are not signs made in the basement from love. Hashtag troublemakers.
Made in the basement of love with the milkmen and other regular Americans.
I like when Trump tries to get all new agey on people for being negative or having bad vibes or whatever. That's fun.
These are not the love-infused milk people doing it from their hearts.
I think that's
it's
his way of saying
top-down command
they're
and
not
control.
sincere. They're not sincere, is what he's trying to say, I think. But made in your basement from love.
Pretty sincere. Sounds sincere to me. What part of sincere don't you understand? Fake sincere. Fake sincere. It's part of the resistance.
Oh, I guess it was Gohmert who sort of launched off all the Soros stuff. If we want to play.
All right. Well, here is Louis Gohmert.
Christ, here we go.
So this is the way this goes, right? Louis Gohmert, a backbencher, but also, a marginalized figure because he's so nuts.
But he's right in the cognitive mainframe of the Republican Party.
That's right. That's right. But he is the one who first traffics in this stuff. And then Grassley hears that Gohmert has said it. And so Grassley regurgitates it. And then Trump tweets it out. But here is Louis Gohmert, like sort of patient zero of this argument that George Soros is behind all of the anti-Kavanaugh protests.
The Democratic Party has been politically corrupt now for 20 years, and at the same time, their connections to the Democratic Party and the Democratic National Committee and Democratic administrations are documented, and will be more so before we're through.
Raise their forearm and raise their hands and yell "Heil Soros" is the way they've headed, but.
Soros, you should know, survived the Holocaust, was, I think, about 14 or 15, maybe 13 when the Holocaust hit, and made his way to England from Hungary, which was occupied by the Germans at that time.
So really, he should know better.
Didn't Glenn Beck imply, though, back in like 2010 that Soros was a collaborator?
Not imply.
He said it.
Yes. The story was that as a 13 or 14-year-old, I believe it was, maybe a 15-year-old, Soros was forced to go with either a German official or a Jewish official who was working for the Germans to go around and check, I think, the homes of Jews to see if any of them were still living there. And so, and it was a very brief stint, and he, of course, was 14 years old. And that they've now said that he was some type of Nazi collaborator.
It was brief, but it was fascinating to hear about. Especially for a devil, George Soros is a fascinating guy.
But it's also sort of fascinating because of the enormous big money that is pulsating through the right, that this is just another classic sort of case of projection. There's no doubt
That's all Republican politics
there's
is.
no doubt that some of these organizations that are organizing the protests get some funding from either George Soros or a George Soros funded foundation or something to that. I mean, I would be upset to learn that they were not getting, there was none, no Soros money was involved in this, because he's supposed to be the billionaire that funds everything. But it just doesn't work on the left the way that it works on the right in terms of the amount of money and how it's spread around.
If the right is so concerned about these things, they can join us for calls for transparency. Because I'd like a website that shows all these sort of contributions.
No problem.
I'm curious to know when they're going to transition from Soros to Steyer and what they're going to say about him when his money's just thrown around. I don't know.
There could be a little bit of a problem, is that Steyer doesn't have the same allure that a Soros has. He's not foreign. He's not hook-nosed. That is, one of the things that makes, I think, it easier for them to villainize
I'd like to see Grassley in that strategy session. So the problem we're talking about Steyer is he's not a hook-nosed foreign Jew. Soros makes it easy that way when you're talking about the resistance. Now, I need a nap.
Let's go to the IMs. JJ Cool. Car bomb activism. Michael's on fire today. Sam, why doesn't Jamie think the courts are important? Sean, remember when the Republicans who are making excuses for a man that drank in high school were completely reasonable about Malia Obama when she drank a beer legally? Yeah, me neither. Gabe, formerly from Chicago, Patman discussion. Jamie was right. Y'all were wrong. Left is best. L'chaim. Buffet Boys, love the idea of Sam at the strip club last night asking the girls, are you a 1099 or a tenant? I need to know before I get a dance medal.
You need to embody the change you seek in the world. So tell me the status, Candy, or else I can't go forward.
Have you joined the Tort Week Ralph Club yet? No, I have not. Solidarity. So did the centrist organizers of Politicon also include a panel on should we be fascists? Because then you could actually have some real ones like Tucker. Winnipeg. Craig, Sam, you look super classy and professional in that suit. I don't like it. SJW centrist. If Bernie is so woke, why did he take his wife? Why did his wife take his last name? Fraud. Dr. Chaos MD. If trade deals are updated with some of the worst aspects of TPP, like the corporate tribunal that supersedes law by sovereign nations, is that going to be how a conglomerate like Monsanto Bayer is going to get out of paying damages arising from lawsuits? If so, how do we fight against corporate criminals going forward? That's a different. That's not implicated here. That's not a trade question. Comrade Biden, Michael Brooks is screaming outside my window about Lula da Silva at 3 a.m. A Square, Sam, looking very much the part today. What if, in your opinion, will the effect on the midterms if Kavanaugh nomination goes down? I mean, my contention was an open seat would have helped the Republicans. But I'm starting to think that is not the case. That it will demoralize the Republicans, and that the sort of the modus operandi of the right wing mind is more about aggrievement for Kavanaugh, and if he's not there actually actively being aggrieved, I mean, I think they want to win. I don't know. My guess is that it will help the Democrats marginally. I just don't think the Republicans seem to have gotten very excited about this Kavanaugh thing. I think a month from now, if Kavanaugh's gone and there's this sense that they're going to get someone else, or just a month from now, it may not be sustaining. I just don't know.
Well, did you see that article I sent you about how the achievement gap between Democrats and Republicans has narrowed? The enthusiasm gap has narrowed.
Yeah, we talked about that yesterday, actually.
Oh, okay.
And it has been largely, they have been motivated by Kavanaugh. It's unclear to me what happens if he goes down, or even if he's actually confirmed. It's the white aggrievement, the white male aggrievement is just triggering for these folks. And that's what that has been, I think, the sort of the central driving force behind the Republican Party's strategy.
It's going to be interesting. Heidi's pivot now, she released an ad, and it was Republicans too often side with those in power, and Democrats too often tried to tell us how to live. So that's like her new line going into the election.
That's interesting.
Interesting.
Political jargon. Can we explain how the Biden precedent is so stupid because it was in 1991 when Biden said that, and it's not in the Constitution?
And it's not, and he's not really saying what. Well, I don't know. What was he saying? Was he saying what they?
Well, I don't know
what they're referring to.
I don't know if the Biden precedent is the idea of like that Biden rose the issue of perhaps not confirming an appointee, that close to the election, but in fact they ended up confirming an appointee or a nominee, or if they're talking about his FBI quote. Which also just said was no different than what anybody else was saying, which is when the FBI vets a candidate, they're just providing information. They're not making conclusions. Theo, Jamie and Michael, why wouldn't social dem work globally as a stopgap until socialism? What's the most logical thing to fight for in our lifetime?
Oh, I think it would work globally as a transitional program, probably. It'll buy us a little bit of time, hopefully, before the horrible humanitarian crisis that brings on either a successful right-wing revolution towards neo-feudalism or a left-wing revolution towards socialism. There's a lot to be said for it.
Yeah, I mean, social democracy is in play right now. It's something that's coming from parties like Podemos, which are identified as far left, but they're really fairly social democratic. I don't think there's an inevitability to any of it. The one thing that everything runs up against is if there's a complete ecological collapse within a very short period of time. But I'm not teleological, so we'll see.
I think
Jules said.
Sorry,
okay.
I think one more purpose that it could serve, like we were having an argument about economics the other day, about whether or not basically the capitalist mode of production, et cetera, would support some kind of global social democracy. I think at the end of the day, the revolutionary left is going to fight on whatever terrain we have. So if, we get social democracy, we pay for it with MMT, everything's great, we'll be fighting from a position of relative strength and comfort. If the crisis takes everything to shit and people are in a desperate situation, we'll be fighting from a position of desperation.
All right, going to the IMs. Jules, I think you're right. 4 of them worked it out like this. M votes no on Murkowski on cloture to leave stage to Collins to vote no, and Manchin can slip under the radar voting with Dems, and Flake lays low and votes yes. I think that's a possible scenario. It's very difficult to say at this point. Hold on one second. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 631 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, it's Maya. I wasn't sure if I entered everything right. So it's nice to talk to you.
I'm sorry?
I said it's Maya. I wasn't sure how to call in. This is my first time, so I'm really happy to be talking to you.
Oh, well, thanks for calling. Where are you calling from, Maya?
I'm calling from Long Island. I wanted to call in about the interview that I saw yesterday with Becca Timmons about human trafficking.
Right, okay.
Because I'm an actual sex worker, and I'm a DACA recipient. So I was smuggled here when I was 5. So it was interesting getting her input, although it was really, it kind of tells me everything that's kind of wrong with people who are fighting for human trafficking, because obviously agencies like ICE, they kind of operate on that whole mentality too of we're saving people from human trafficking, and the preventions under which they have that are very violent.
Yeah, well, get more specific about what Timmons said, because I felt that I felt like we were going around in circles a little bit, that it was problematic to go after these outlets, because if you're successful, all you're doing is making it harder for people to track who has and has not been trafficked.
Yeah, she spent a lot of that time just saying, I don't know, it's very young, and so you can't really judge FOSTA SESTA because we just started it. And that's kind of the justification every single agency that fights trafficking kind of gives. Give it a chance, it's so young, you can't judge it.
What's your perspective?
She was talking about how they need to...
What's your perspective on the potential for efficacy by SESTA FOSTA?
I don't. It's been having a really bad impact on me. I actually did a Vice special because there was a Australian reporter that was talking about the impacts of FOSTA SESTA globally, because it's not just impacting women in the U.S., but it's just global now, because these platforms that were made in the U.S. they reach the global landscape. So now people from overseas that have legalized sex work and decriminalized sex work are feeling the impacts as well. But I wanted to talk about...
Okay, well, go ahead.
I also wanted to talk about something she said. She said that she wanted to take away the tools of traffickers, which is a really common thing that police and other government agencies use. So, like a jail, a prison said that they were going to ban books because someone might smuggle drugs. So, or they were going to ban all immigrants to prevent trafficking. Like, we need to take the kids away from these parents, from their parents, because these parents are criminals, they're traffickers. There's things like that. Take away the tools is taking away the resources. Obviously, these people are just like us, but what they don't understand is that a lot of internet provider services and stuff like that, like Arrows, is a full prostitution website, escort website, and when you go on there, they actually try to screen you to make sure that you're consenting to this, and there's a whole bunch of processes they go through. So they take your ID and they make sure that it matches your face, like all that kind of stuff. They really want to prevent human trafficking. We look after our own, but unfortunately the system has made it to the point where we are afraid to report cases of actual, abuse of power because we will be persecuted. And, it extends much more past sex work to, why are laborers exploited so much? Why are immigrants exploited so much? It's because the system has criminalized us as a whole.
Well, I mean, I will say this. I mean, I think, the construct of taking away the tools is not, I think it's a mistake to say in all aspects, in the way that you're making analogies to different situations, it's bad, right? I mean, I want to restrict access to guns because it's the tool for mass murder. And in that instance, I think it's an effective one. But I think the idea is that there needs to be a greater awareness of the need for rights for sex workers, and not a knee-jerk response to dealing with trafficking, but one that actually is more practical and effective. And it seems to me that in terms of like those ads, it's the only way that we have as a society of tracking down folks who have been trafficked. And we need to be able to assess sites, like you say, that are effective in screening. We need to be able to sort of recognize that that's possible and that's legitimate. I mean, and to me, it starts first with what you need, I think, is to legalize sex work more broadly, so that we can then begin to, regulate in a rational way, in a way that protects sex workers in the same way that we want to protect workers more broadly.
Yeah, I do think that with these online, like all the online places, they turn over any information they have when it comes to an investigation over to police. So it's not like that was never in place before. And obviously, if you're going to persecute, someone for a crime, you would persecute the trafficker. You would persecute the person doing the thing, not the person running the whole website, unless they were like somehow involved. But they have this weird idea that I guess traffickers are going to the person running the website and they're like, yeah, man, I'm going to sell children and you'll get a cut of the profit and we're all in this together. So the FBI report on Backpage, the evidence that they had of this happening was that Backpage had rules for what ads they allowed up. So if you said things like, child or something like that, or if you put that in the ad, they wouldn't allow that up on their ads. And they looked at that and they was like, see, this is proof that Backpage knows that their children are being sold on here. But every website has that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think it's unfortunate. I'm not sure. I think, there needs to be a comprehensive addressing of this issue, so that, Sessa and Fosta would not make sense in the context of a structure where sex work was protected like other work. But I appreciate you calling in, Maya.
Yeah, and it also takes away the tools that sex workers use to keep themselves and each other safe, right?
Right. I mean, that's what her argument was about that particular portal, I guess. Calling from an 818 area code. Who's this?
This is Pete Perlman from Los Angeles. Hi.
Hello, Pete. What's on your mind?
This being casual Shabbat, I figured I could suggest something to view. Not a movie, really, but it's a Netflix original series. Is that legal? Can I do that?
Sure.
It's not
I
a
mean,
movie?
yeah. Do it quick.
Okay. Anyway, it's The Good Cop, and I couldn't help thinking of you because the main character, or one of the two main characters, looks just like you, like a skinnier version of you, Sam. Josh Groban. You familiar with him?
No, but that's fine.
He's the skinnier version.
Yeah, but anyway, it's with Tony Danza and Josh Groban, and I've never been a huge Tony Danza fan, but he's really good in this, and it's well written, it's funny. Like
Pete,
one of
what's
the
it called
jokes
again?
in the first step.
What's it called again?
The Good Cop. The Good Cop.
The Good Cop. All right. Well, I mean, people will check it out.
Matt always very fast with the Google image search, and when people point this out.
It does look like you.
Does it look like me?
Yeah.
All right.
And
Well,
then,
it is not.
well, I got to tell you, one joke that I thought was great was this guy saying things that don't make sense, and he says, "Why did the Flintstones celebrate Christmas?" Right?
Yeah, that's okay. I mean, I don't know, Pete. I appreciate the call. I appreciate the call.
Sam,
I'm not
as
sure.
a former sitcom writer yourself, you can appreciate a great joke. Like, why didn't the Flintstones celebrate Christmas? Come on.
As someone who's been in comedy to some extent for decades, Sam, I'm a little surprised that you weren't a little faster on that one.
I have not the tolerance of most people for that type of pop culture repartee.
Are you just pissed that you didn't write it because that's so good?
No, I'm pissed that this guy Brogan is taking my look and monetizing it.
Hey, I have an idea. What if we said the Flintstones Christmas doesn't make sense? No.
Jesus
Am
wasn't
I
even
right?
around yet.
Jesus wasn't there.
Well, I mean, I think there's a certain amount of suspension of disbelief because, of course, cavemen did not have cars that they worked with
I
their
do
feet,
like the
so-
idea that like in between like the pet dinosaur scenario, the real it's like, and you know what else on top of it? Christmas.
I gotta say, if
what the hell's going on?
If the drive-through lady put the Brontosaurus ribs on my car and tipped it over, I would be suing.
Of course.
And it would be a frivolous lawsuit.
It's like hot coffee.
It's like the hot coffee of the Flintstones era.
Well, we know
folks, we have a Matt pick this week for the video. I assume that this video number 5 is that pick. Is that right, Matt? That, of course, is...
Oh, yeah, we can do that one. Yeah, that's a Matt pick.
Yeah, Donald Trump is
that's a pure
walking
Matt pick.
onto Air Force One, and here is Matt picks for the week. He's headed to he's in the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport, and apparently he's got some TP stuck to his shoe.
Ew. So gross.
Oh, there it is.
Oh, God. Oh.
It's 2-ply.
I mean, look.
And the wave.
He leaves it at the top of the stairs.
Here you go.
Brendan's
Just
upset.
a little something.
Brendan's
I wanna leave
upset because
something
he
everywhere
thinks
I go.
he found that first, but I also favored it last night. So
That is so disgusting.
All right. Brendan and Matt's pick.
That is so gross, man.
it's a good thing he's immune to shame. Otherwise, that might have been embarrassing for him.
Well, wait for all the MAGA
Did it on
people to come
purpose.
out and say, you got to support your president. Show us your pictures of TP on your shoe.
No, somebody should like write something on a napkin like QAnon and say, "I found what was on his shoe." It's a secret message.
Exactly. He was dropping
That's
a
what it
secret
is.
message.
Yeah.
This is interesting. The DCCC has put out a new ad. It's just for online.
It's a good ad.
And to some extent, they can see the polling. Here is a poll from Generation Forward, which is the Martin O'Malley PAC. Is that right? Where like I said, I think O'Malley would have won.
Yeah, he would have.
There is.
True.
He's breaking down various groups in terms of their relationship to socialism versus capitalism. This is millennials. You can see African Americans favor capitalism, or I should say favor socialism, 44 to 34%. Asian Americans, 59 to 56%. Latinx, 48% favor socialism to 45% capitalism. And then whites, I wonder why, 54% in favor of capitalism versus 42% in favor of socialism.
Still's not bad.
Must be genetic.
It's not bad.
I have to tell you.
Right, exactly.
It's genetic.
Exactly.
It's a genetic
There must be
flaw
some
in
genetic.
white. Yeah. Like,
But
you
here
can't
is-
deny the science.
But
here-
Bernie ran a racist campaign based only on white issues.
Here is
Like getting health care for white people.
The DCCC, at the very least, they get that this dynamic is out there. They released this ad on the tax break for the wealthy.
Sir,
Yeah.
what happens when the average Joe out there realizes that we got like the entire Republican tax cut? I mean, we got like all of it. You know?
Oh, come on. They got a tax cut, okay? Side table. How much was your tax cut?
It was not a lot, sir.
Yeah, but for someone like Side Table, not a lot is actually quite a bit.
That's true.
I bet he saves enough each week to buy a latte at Starbucks, right?
Actually,
Shut up, Side Table. We are John Cruz. Okay? Remember that, okay? Coat rack. Did you see what's taking the lobster tail so long? You got it. Thank you.
Oh, I'm hungry.
Yeah, right.
That's a very good ad.
Yeah, I think it's okay. I mean, but it's more interesting to me that at the very least they're getting what their messaging should be, or at the very least what is going to resonate more with younger folks, and that they're now wading into the class war, where I think largely Democrats for decades have been on the side of on the sidelines. I don't know how sincere they are. I don't know. I think there's a lot of remains to be seen what they'll do from a policy perspective. But at the very least, if Democrats win on this message, it creates more pressure and that they need to deliver, right? I mean, if they don't win on that message, it's harder to argue they need to deliver on that message. And so this is encouraging. Do we have the other ad with the old folks?
I can look for it here.
Yeah, let's play this because this is also interesting. I am a little bit less excited about this ad. I get the idea here, but I'm not a big generational warfare person, because the next step is when they start to blame. They use this as a means in which to attack Social Security. But and I'm not sure exactly who put out this ad, but this is it block the vote? I think it's something like that, and they are trying to encourage younger people to go out and vote, and they're doing so by doing this tongue-in-cheek representation of older Americans who are happy to have young people not vote.
Trump, that was us.
He's our guy.
Tax cuts for the rich? Hell yeah. I'm rich as
Climate change? That's a you problem.
I'll be dead soon. Sure, school shootings are sad.
But I haven't been in a school for 50 years.
I can't keep track of which lives matter.
You won't vote.
You young people never do.
But I do.
I do.
Wow.
There you go.
These bastards shouldn't be allowed to vote. It's disgusting. I'm so enraged.
Bring back the
I am no
Torts.
longer a socialist. I simply want to destroy baby boomers. I have a bloodthirst.
Generational warfare.
Generational warfare all the way. Replace
I mean,
Seder and sitcoms. Ban old people from voting.
I think the value of an ad like that is that it gets just people talking about the disparity in terms of how many young people go out to vote.
That's true.
And they can make a big difference. And so, in that respect, I think it's a fairly effective ad. And I like the politics of younger people versus older people. Not generically speaking. I'm just saying that the younger generation, broadly speaking, tends to have more left politics than older people.
Well,
that doesn't mean that there aren't older people who have lefter politics. And I say this as someone who's very close to being a person who could have easily been cast in that ad. But
well, younger people have less capital.
I want Social Security.
In general, that's true. But I also think just that this generation, in particular, because of the context in which they've grown up, it's not just that they have less capital, because younger people generally have less capital, but they have less capital than younger people have in the past. So there's a certain uniqueness to the condition of this younger generation, as opposed to like when my generation was the younger generation.
And the Cold War is off too.
The Cold War is off. There's a lot of different factors.
Yeah, and there's more than one generation now facing this kind of uncertain future, right? Like, people use millennials interchangeably with young people, but the oldest millennials are almost 40. And there's a new generation of people who are about as fucked. So it'll be interesting to see.
Speaking about evil empires, I am not going to mix sports with our program here. Of course, the Red Sox are meeting the Yankees today in just a number of hours to hopefully defeat them. But this is disgusting. The Yankees apparently were staying at some type of Marriott hotel, and Unite Here, Local 26, which represents hundreds of striking workers who are striking against Marriott-run hotels because they're seeking more stable schedules, living wage, and various on-the-job protections, have been on strike since earlier this week on Wednesday. And here's some footage of some of those despicable Yankees crossing the picket line. Good for the unions. for in Boston, no better way to get solidarity for a Boston Union than the New York Yankees crossing the picket line.
The New York Yankees actually really played their part there.
Ugh.
They
pretty
really
perfectly, just in terms of being complete and utter assholes.
Sean is going to be so disappointed when he sees this video.
Some solidarity. They're all in a
Yankees
union.
Fan.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why
I don't know why the baseball union is not actually. It's sort of surprising in a way.
Yeah.
Farmer Michael, glyphosate usage has also created glyphosate-resistant weeds, which is now making it essentially pointless to use. Fat Nixon, these attacks on victims of sexual assault by Trump should be the final nail in the coffin for the Supreme Court vote. As a man who has many women in my life who has not reported their rapes or sexual assaults, voting yes after these statements legitimizes them. These statements tell men they won't be caught and women they won't be believed. We should be putting these statements in front of Collins Flake Mansion as often as possible. Psychedelic Quaker, I believe Arlen Specter was the last senator to switch parties. Was Jeffords...
Jeffords was before Specter.
Before
significantly
Specter.
because Jeffords was, I think, like Bush, and Specter was right after Obama, right?
Remember, Jim Justice, the governor of West Virginia, did this last year as well.
Governors, I think, do it more frequently.
Yeah.
State politicians. Contagious Chameleon on the left, paying attention to the courts. Ian Samuel on Katie Halper's show said we need to neutralize the courts or just get them out of the way. In our society, exactly. In our society currently, that includes voting for Democrats. If there are people on the left who aren't thrilled with the proposition, then they should join the other liberal cause of pushing for ranked choice voting in multi-member districts. That will make it easier for third parties, or they could join groups to get money out of politics. All these causes that liberals are fighting for will build space for the left. We have to align with them. This is the consequence of the right gaining power. I mean, I don't know what it means. Neutralize the courts or get them out of our way. I just don't know what that means in practice.
Doesn't mean anything.
You could have a time machine filibuster, but you're fucking corporate sellouts. That's what it means. But you'd prefer to smear Tulsi Gabbard than invest in a time machine project to change the Supreme Court because you support war in Syria. Fuck you.
Bluster, where do I sign up to get my protester check? Andrew in Olympia, writing on the assumption that my fellow Washingtonian Ronald Reagan is not called in before you read this, I want to encourage listeners to go to redirectpodcast.com, listen to the latest episode of the Redirect Podcast where Reagan and co-host interview Alyssa Milano.
Yes.
They talk about Kavanaugh and Alyssa's activism around immigration rights. Alyssa is super fascinating and gracious. Peace. Whoa. Ronald Reagan.
Always should listen to Redirect. Excellent podcast.
Zoe, first a Yankees hat, now a Cubs hat. Jesus Christ, Matt Leck. Can Brendan knock that shit off his head and please give him a Mets hat?
Yeah, the Cubs hat is just because of the story we just talked about.
ID. Mike Thurnovich put out a video on Kavanaugh. I bet you can't guess what he thinks. Attorney Andrew, DSA already does this to some extent, but the left needs to form an active role in cultivating an army of leftist attorneys and potential judges. On the structural issues to producing leftist judges, Jamie identified, they are only structural in the same way as not having Medicare for all is structural. Pushing legislatures to back public interest attorneys, public defenders, and academics for judgeships can push back on structural impediments. It is true, though, that not being a corporate lawyer will prevent you from hobnobbing with CEOs and senators, which is the main track to prestigious legal career. Krista Nietzsche, there was a Steyer write-up in the NRA magazine by none other than Oliver North. Wooden computers. Hey, Sam, you ever been to a tort lore museum in Winsted, Connecticut, founded by good Ralph Nader? No, but, I have actually talked to the director of that museum. He has been in this conference before. I've never interviewed him. I don't think. Or maybe I did for Ring of Fire, actually.
I'm 100% sure that my dad has been there.
I would definitely check that out if I'm in the hood. Congressional baseball fan. Congressional baseball fan. Some of you guys are getting together at Tobin's house for a baseball workout. Don't tell Brett. He always creeps me out when he talks about my 13-year-old sister.
Ew.
All right. Soy Capitan, will the other Supreme Court justices shun Bready Boy as their inferior? I don't know. Isha, why don't the Democrats move the fight from a culture war to an economic argument? Kavanaugh will protect the employer's right to get mauled by a killer whale. I mean, there was some of that. Certainly, they did even more of that during the Gorsuch hearing, right? That was like the entire line of questioning was big interest versus little interest. But I just, the nature of moving someone like Manchin and Heitkamp and Donnelly is, I think, more about process. And I think, in this instance also about, something that is sort of extrajudicial. The idea that this guy is also potentially an attempted rapist. The DX Fool, Hive Fave lands. Can't wait for Mike Papantonio's twice-a-year visit to Ring of Fire in order to justify being on the show's masthead. Today, the Trump Labor Department said the unemployment rate dropped to 3.7%, the lowest since '69. How much is this due to Obama? How much is due to Trump massaging the numbers? When do you think the fight for 15 will be reflected in the stats? I don't know what you mean by the fight for 15 reflected in the stats. Look, the trajectory has been the same. There's been really no change in the trajectory that we have seen. Wages still tend to be stagnant. There has been no significant acceleration of wage growth. So, does Trump get credit? He's not screwed it up yet, although I think there's a very good argument that the wealth inequality is going to be a problem, that the middle class has been hurt by rising rents because of wealth inequality, and they're being, and I would say also probably people living in poverty as well, because this sort of trickles down. But once you have such wealth inequality, it begins to hurt the rest of basically everyone except for that top 10%, because of things like housing prices going up. And if you don't have any type of wage increases, then people's buying power, essentially goes down. And so that's the overall economy in terms of like sheer numbers, and maybe even in terms of joblessness. A lot of people have left the job force, but that's been, ongoing since the 2008 crisis. If people aren't making more money, then they're actually, in some respects, essentially making less, because the cost of things starts to go up.
Yeah.
Particularly housing.
As I understand it, there is no state in the country right now where a person can afford a one-bedroom apartment working 40 hours a week at minimum wage.
There you have it. Calling from a 651 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Is this me?
Yep. Who's this? Where are you calling
from?
from?
Hey, my name's John. I live in Minnesota, Stillwater, Minnesota, and all right. So this morning I had breakfast with a near and dear friend of mine. I say that kind of in quotes. We went to high school together. We're about mid-20s now, and I used to be a libertarian. Now I'm a socialist. Fellow comrade. And thank you. Okay. And my friend, he's very much on the opposite side of the political spectrum of me. And today, during breakfast, he was talking about how he finally found a psychologist that he likes to listen to. And he said, and guess what? He's not from here, and he's from Canada. And I asked him, is it Jordan Peterson? And he goes, oh, you've heard of him.
Fucking me.
Should I just cut my friendship loose with this guy?
Yes.
No. I would try and save him before he goes too deep into that stuff. Look, you are a perfect example of somebody who can come out of it.
Give him some apple cider.
What was it? Let's put it this way, John. What was it that made you realize that your libertarianism was folly?
Well, I went through a lot of mental health problems, and I saw that the happiest countries were socialist countries. Bada bing, bada boom, right there.
That's
There you
really
go.
interesting.
What is the basis of your? Yeah.
What was that? No.
What is the basis? What is the basis of your friend's ideology?
I don't know. That's the thing. I've been trying to figure it out. I've been trying to dig. I've been digging at it for a few years now, trying to figure out why he thinks this way. I mean, he's even advocated for eugenics in the past. He's like, there's people who are a waste on society.
As I was
It's just
saying,
like,
cut him out.
I mean, at that point, like, if that's the case, I mean, the only thing I guess I would say is, like, how do you know that you're not one of those people?
That's a damn good question.
I mean, what
What do you
makes
mean
him
that-
so? What makes him so sure that if somebody unravels the eugenics program, that he's not on the list to go?
the thing is, he would be too, because he was born with heart murmurs.
Gotta
Yeah,
go.
we
Get
don't
the
need
fuck
those-
out.
We don't
Sorry.
need we don't need the heart murmurs.
I don't
guys
need
around.
heart murmuring Jordan Peterson fans. Goodbye.
Yeah, no, but like, pushing people away just digs them in more to their
No,
beliefs,
I agree with
and
you.
it's just,
Listen, Michael's saying this, and he's being a little bit glib. I
little
think,
glib.
look, in this instance,
I knew Michael was going to do that. I knew he was going to do that, so I've just been ignoring
that is
him.
Michael's
So me.
predictability is one of his best traits. But I would suggest
Sam's very
that
unpredictable.
that you say to him, like, well, what if society decided that heart murmur guys who have maybe some emotional issues, too much of a drain? I mean, I would take it that way, to maybe sort of like see if there's any.
There was this.
I mean, the thing is, it's not always a conversation about eugenics. It's usually a topic about, the welfare state or something like that.
Well,
and
but the
he
point
doesn't
is,
realize that he was born in upper middle class.
right. My point is you need to try and get him to empathize in some way.
But there's
with
a way,
like, even if it's a hypothetical.
But
And-
there's this Ayn Rand example I want to use because I think it works for this. Because somebody was asking, how can she have such a mass following when, by definition, not everybody who buys her books are going to be financially successful or CEOs, which is basically the only people in her writing she said are worth basically even living and respecting, right? And there was a letter that some guy wrote her, and some guy, he was not happy in his career. He wasn't particularly successful. He didn't have any prestige or money. And he said, basically like, I feel like I get your writing and I'm part of this like elite group, but at the same time, like, I'm not a master of the world. So like, what does that mean about me? And she was like, well, you know what? If you can read my books and you understand them, then by definition, you're part of this elite. Like, even if it doesn't look like it outside right now, she went like super woo-woo on him. And I think actually Jordan Peterson does that quite a bit. At least, he does a lot of signaling where it's like, all of these people are trash, but if you have a very specific set of difficulties and grievances, you actually either A, ironically, you actually are being oppressed, and B, you are still part of some like cognitive elite. So I think that's a hard lane to try to get somebody to have empathy through, to be honest.
I don't know,
But
a
it's
heart murmur. Heart
the
murmur.
right impulse to want to personalize it.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I would try that, and then if that doesn't work, then cut them loose, get some new friends. Appreciate
it's
the call,
harder
John.
when it's your family.
As Chris Rock would say, he isn't talking about me.
What's that last word?
What
Go
I've
ahead.
known about, what I've noticed about people on the left and people on the right is that people on the left, we will respond to these personal stories because we have empathy, but people on the right tend to be more appeal to authority. Like he said like, oh, I like Trump because he's better than Obama, and I asked how, like, why, what do you like about him? He's like, well, I don't know, he's just better. Like, it's appeal to authority. They like people who yell the loudest, and there's just, what do you do with that?
Well, like I say, you try and personalize it. Go into what their maybe their flaw or their weakness is, and say, how would you, why is it not justified that others exploit that? And if that doesn't slowly begin to create some empathy in them, then I would say cut them loose and tell them that the voting day actually is on Wednesday, not on Tuesday.
I prefer
Appreciate
friends
the call, John.
without heart murmurs.
Yes, heart murmurs. We don't need people running around with weak, most important organs in the body.
My mother told
All
me
right,
I had great
final,
organs.
Final call for the day. Calling from a 215 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Sam. It's Mindy. How are you?
Here we go.
Hello, Mindy. How are you?
Nice.
Hi. I just
You are
wanna
the
say,
final
how are
caller
you
of the
guys?
week. Great.
First of all, Jamie was brilliant today. I just agree with everything she said. She's just on point on
Look at
everything.
that.
Thank you, Mindy.
There you go.
From Morning
yeah.
Joe to communism. Sweet.
I don't know. I've been really depressed about this whole Kavanaugh thing, and I woke up this morning, and I kind of think we're going to pull it out. I don't know. I mean, I'm going to deny I said that if we lose, but I think we're going to pull it out. I don't know. I just have this gut vibe, this mom gut vibe that I don't think we're going to go there today. What do you think?
I tend to think that Collins. I tend to think that Collins. I don't know. I mean, I would say I think there's a net 5% chance that Collins. I mean, I think it's like 55 that she's gonna vote. She's gonna vote no. 45 that she's gonna vote yes. And then I assume Manchin would follow that. But it's a very strange time. It's very difficult to get a sense of this. I don't know why Manchin would alienate the Democrats needlessly.
Unless he's planning to defect. That's my big worry right now.
Right.
I think
right.
because I think besides that, I think it's going
Manchin.
down. But if not, he might go to the GOP. No, that's my only scare scenario right now.
Yeah, like Brendan said, it would not be the first time a West Virginia Democrat has done that.
Right.
People online are saying that's West Wingy to think that he might defect, but
I don't think it's West Wing at all. I think it's to get myself a good deal. It's the opposite of West Wing, actually.
I mean, I think he's going to win, and I think he must think he's going to win, and so I don't know. But Mindy, hang in there. We'll have a better sense in 10 minutes.
Okay,
but,
I just want to tell you last thing. Manchin's worth $83 million, so it's not a money thing.
And his daughter was the CEO of a drug company which spiked, I forget which case it was, but it was one of those obscene, price. Well, yeah, it was EpiPen, right? His daughter's the CEO of that company. So bad people.
All right.
Yeah.
Bad people.
I don't know. I mean, just cross your finger. I don't know. I just have that mommy thing. Oh, my son got engaged.
Congratulations, Mindy.
Off.
All right.
Yes, my son got engaged last Saturday at the University of Michigan in the Law Quad where they met.
Wow.
Cute.
All right. Well, very
Adorbs.
cute. Congratulations, Mindy. All right, folks. Oh.
All right. I'm going to hang up the phone, Sam.
Okay.
All right.
And we'll just take a couple more IMs and then get going here. Space Cadet Bone Spurs. For the right, it's all the football game of red shirts versus blue shirts. They defend Kavanaugh because he's on their team. The way is way too nitpicky for the goal of power. Old school, new rules. Trump didn't deserve to win the 2016 election, but Clinton deserved to lose for everything she did in the election, the primary, Secretary of State, everything in the New York Senate race and everything in Arizona. I don't know what you're talking about. Trump is still the better outcome, if only for the new energy and interest in progressive politics. Not a very, that is a very either ignorant and or privileged perspective.
Look, as a member of the anti-capitalist revolutionary left, let me tell you, we're not ready for a revolution. We need time. Democrats winning buys us some time.
Blue Guild, Kavanaugh, maybe you can help listeners understand that simply being as shitty as possible is an integral part of being Republican/authoritarian, regardless of policy outcomes. Dems versus Republicans isn't apples and oranges, it's apples versus pitchforks. And the final IM of the day, Sam's Tinder profile. Hey girl, swipe right. Did you see me demolish Charlie Kirk at Politicon? Kind of like Chris Sale blowing away Yankee batters tonight. Am I right, girl? All right, folks. See you on Monday.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie bar. Finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks.